back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
I'm Landon.
And I'm Kason.
Okay, this thing hopefully will stay on my face for some time. We'll see how long.
Hey, comment below if you know what this mask is from, by the way.
Do you know what this is from?
If you can tell.
Take a look at our main channel.
Oh, snap.
See if you can find out.
What are you talking about? This is our main channel.
This is our main channel.
This is our main channel now.
our filmmaking channel.
Check out our second channel, just called Dark Pixel.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a lot of topics, but I can't read them, so...
Okay, so number one here, was realism intended for Final Fantasy VII? This is coming off of that Polygon article, right?
Yes, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of... So Polygon
huge article.
Has done some pretty cool stuff lately. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, so anyways, we got a good quote from Sakaguchi here that you'll have to wait to hear.
Wait
Okay,
2 minutes
just
to
like
hear.
2 minutes. Okay, and then Tetsuya Nomura was just interviewed by Weekly Famitsu, and he's quoted as saying that Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy VII Remake are mata, like have a little ways to go. So, talk about that. What do we got? Nintendo Switch predictions here?
Yep. We're going to give our prediction for the Switch event, which is coming tomorrow night, for all of you guys.
Depending on where you live in the world, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm still a little confused at exactly how all that time is lining
I
up
feel
for
like
everybody.
it's a Japan event, and so we're just kind of...
Yeah.
They're like, hey, you can watch too, but it's like,
Yeah.
freaking...
You guys can
midnight
watch too
if you live on
can.
the East Coast, yeah.
Fetch.
Anyways, then Scalebound was canceled. Big Microsoft funded
exclusive
game, yeah, exclusive that was being produced or being developed by Platinum Games. We'll talk about that. Our thoughts on what it was and other games that get canceled because budgets are just so big on games now and they're trying to do so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are our favorite video game based movies? Yuns of Provo asked us. I've got a lot to say there. There's some good ones and there's some really bad ones.
Got another user question from Savage here. It's kind of long. I'll just read it. I have the feeling that Japanese storytelling is very often very vague, and I don't understand certain aspects of the story properly. So I was wondering, is this a cultural thing? Like, if I could speak Japanese and would understand the way they think and talk about certain things, then would I get the story? Because in the last couple of years, I often feel like I'm left with this feeling like something may be lost in translation. So
Very
Get
interesting.
it? Lost in translation.
I get it.
If you don't know yet, Landon has a whole show called Lost in Translation. It's been on a bit of a hiatus, but
it's
back.
been lost in translation.
Nice.
Coming back.
I finally figured out how I'm
gonna
going
make
to
it
open
come
up
back.
this next one. I finally made the link.
When
And
this next video
it,
comes
like,
out,
sparked.
you guys are going to watch it and you'll be like, Landon's back. Lost in Translation's back.
Oh my gosh! We got one more here.
One more.
Nothing really was asking if we could pick a game or a few games to be representative of how video games are an art form or representative of art. What would we pick?
Good question.
Great stuff.
I think I already know one Mike would pick. I think I already
I'm
know.
going to surprise you.
A King's Tale.
I'm going to betray your
Final Fantasy
expectations.
All right,
man.
so was realism intended for Final Fantasy VII? Now, this comes from a quote from Hironobu Sakaguchi, and we'll go ahead and read it, and then talk about kind of how it's affected video games today. But at the time when you were talking about computer graphics, people wanted to see something very realistic, something that you could throw into a live-action movie, and they couldn't tell the difference. But we use CG to represent anime characters. Because of that, I think a lot of people at the show weren't very interested in it, but that's what we wanted to do. So what he's saying is they had a style they were going for, and people just wanted to see perfectly real everything, right? Mm-hmm. Which when you see, like a lot of the cutscenes for Final Fantasy VIII or Final Fantasy IX, you see some very impressive CG FMVs kind of in between the gameplay. Well, whereas Final Fantasy VII was not at all like that. In fact, it still looked pretty bad.
Well, the environments looked very real.
Very that's true. Real. They did some photoreal treatments there.
But definitely the characters had, especially as you're walking around either the overworld or exploring environments. When you're outside of battle, they don't look real. Like, putting like Cloud side by side, like next to Squall.
Exactly. Squall's very well proportioned. He looks...
And I wonder if Final Fantasy VIII's realistic aesthetic was influenced by maybe what they still felt people wanted to see.
Oh, the reaction
I don't know.
to 7.
I would say
In
that
7, they have skinny... Their hands are just huge like balls, and they have this tiny little skinny arm connecting it to their shoulder. Then it's huge again. It's kind of like Kingdom Hearts.
I think even the FMV sequences... There's no way people will hear me with this sketching thing on.
I think even with the FMV sequences in Final Fantasy VII, that they were not trying to make the game look hyper realistic, say like Resident Evil or something like that. They weren't going for that from the beginning. And I think that a lot of people feel like, especially with the way the remake is turning out right now, like that was the intended aesthetic, and I think Advent Children has added to that
and
expectation.
Crisis Core and Dirge of Cerberus, and
But I
all
think
of the stuff they made after.
What Sakaguchi is saying here is that was never actually the look they were going for. And it's funny to me because of all of the Final Fantasy VII canon that exists, all the games, all of the movies and the anime, the one that looks most right to me is the short little anime movie that they did. It was called... what was that called?
Yeah, I don't remember what that was called.
My Life is King. The one with Denzel, right? The one.
No. It was an anime that was about the Nibelheim incident.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, that one.
Gosh, that's gonna bug me so bad. Anyways, it was like of all of the stuff for Final Fantasy VII that there is, even more so than the game, because I think that they were still struggling to really understand 3D development when they were making that. They were still learning. I feel like that little anime looks the most like correct, or feels the most correct in the way that it looks.
That's probably correct. I mean, given this quote, Sakaguchi saying we use CG to represent anime characters.
Yeah. And that's I mean,
so it makes sense. An anime is what gets the closest to the look they were looking for.
Like, you have the original game, which has some really janky looking models in it.
Right.
But then you watch Advent Children, and like the look of that just never felt right to me. Like the way Cloud looks in Advent Children, like didn't
that is like modern
feel
Square Enix.
It did not feel like what he looked like even just in his FMV model, which again looked like an anime face.
It had a very pointed jaw, very big eyes.
I feel like Square kind of got caught up in this whole like we can do it, so let's do it kind of attitude, where it's like that Ian Malcolm quote. They didn't stop to think about whether or not they should. They're too busy thinking about whether or not they could. And it's like, we can make this more real, so why wouldn't we? And then just go. Which I feel like almost the entire video game industry fell into that trap for like about a decade or so.
Yeah.
I feel like we're only just now getting out of that. So you had stuff that got fed into this, and then
even Zelda, even Twilight Princess, right in the middle of that. Let's make everything look perfectly real. You know, The Legend of Zelda came out with Wind Waker, and people were just so mad about it. So then they made Twilight Princess, and that's like the most realistic of all the Zeldas we've ever seen. But it's not always the best decision.
Yeah, and I actually talked about Final Fantasy VII's character design specifically in one of the Lost in Translation episodes I did over the summer. About Mukokuseki and this whole like non-nationalistic look where you couldn't say what country somebody's from. And we threw a poll up about if people think that Cloud looks Asian or not. And I'm trying to remember, because what was interesting
which
came
Cloud
out of that, exactly.
Yeah.
People start saying which Cloud, which one are we talking about here? And it's just like you've split your character. So sort of how Link has like a Toon Link and like the standard Link, I guess,
That's true. They split. Yeah.
It's almost like Cloud in some ways. There's Toon Cloud, anime Cloud, and then there's like real human being Cloud, which is a little disturbing. Like the shot of Cloud that they showed in the Final Fantasy VII trailer, like the very end, he's looking right at the camera, is a little surreal. His eyes are really big.
That's
he
true.
looks real, but like his facial proportions are a little odd, and then he's so gaunt that it feels like he's so real and so gaunt that it looks kind of scary.
Yeah, it does look strange. Like, that's the one thing about the Final Fantasy VII Remake from what they've shown so far. We're getting out of speculation.
We don't have inside info here.
But from what has actually been shown, he just doesn't feel right to me. He doesn't look right. There's something I don't know.
Well,
And
that's
it-
part of the whole realism when you're realistically trying to portray something that your imagination had
Yeah.
based on the original.
Yeah.
And you can never achieve a realistic look based on, things like anime or books or video games that are older.
Yeah.
So
you know,
hard.
anime, maybe not so much Nomura's style, but what was that style that I was talking about the other week that I
Oh,
don't
the
like?
one, not the
Oh,
Kyoto.
yeah, you're talking about
What's it called?
Moe.
With the humongous
You're talking
eyes.
about Moe.
Yeah.
The Sailor
It's
Moon
like
type,
that.
right?
That like feels okay. It like when it's drawn, it like
Yeah.
it works.
You got a real.
But if you try to
I mean-
translate that, it's kind of like Homer Simpson too. Like anyone
Yeah,
who's
I
tried
was
to like
just gonna say
Oh
that.
my
do like a
gosh.
CG
Those are
rendering
freaky.
of Homer Simpson,
so
it just
scary.
looks jacked.
Yeah,
It's just
all
like
the
oh man.
Homer, the Bart. I think someone did the whole family.
Yeah, and like
so
obviously,
gross.
I'm not saying it's to that extent.
Someone's
But
on Mario
there's-
that way too.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
I've seen
Mario.
that.
Yeah,
Oh,
have
that's
seen Mario
scary.
rendered that way. Yeah,
That's
it's weird.
scary.
But I mean, maybe this will be a topic for another day. But I actually do kind of want to see like a dark Mario game that's
Me
kind of
too.
represented that way.
Me
That'd be
too.
really interesting, sort of like Alice in Wonderland sort of take.
Because
on
it already feels trippy.
Yeah, but yeah,
Mario
it's not.
Sunshine had like a dark shadow
That's true.
dude, kind of looked like Mario.
Obviously, I'm not saying that this remake's look is to that extent, off-putting, but there is something about it to me that doesn't feel right. And I wonder if it had been done with more of a straight-up cel-shaded look,
Breath of
something
the
that's
Wild.
supposed
Yeah.
to look like even what they do in Dragon Quest, right? But just with Nomura's style instead
Yeah.
of
Dragon Quest XI
Toyama's
has
style.
struck a really like a sweet spot. I think possibly the only sweet spot there is between the two. It's like they still look like they could fit in like a Dragon Ball cartoon, but at the
Right.
same time.
But it's not as
and I think it's because
extreme.
some characters look a little more cartoony and some characters look a little more real. And it is kind of weird. Like the more I look at it, the more it's like, dang, like they're like exactly in the middle. They're freaking exactly in the middle.
I think that's a good point. I wonder. I'm not saying they should do it that way, but it would be interesting to see
It would almost be a
a
more
rendering
Yeah.
that way, and just to see like if that felt better.
Because
I say it probably would because it would maintain the
Yeah.
style more. But people may not be as excited about it.
Well-
When I say people, I mean the masses.
Yeah,
not
that's
us.
definitely true.
and how
They
like
want to see a real, perfectly real everything.
yeah, and how the industry has moved forward tone wise and expectation wise.
Mm-hmm.
What people expect from a Final Fantasy game is they've laid out these very clear expectations now.
Yeah, and I think
break
that
is
Seven
really tough.
actually established that because those backgrounds look
Yes, yeah.
really real for
Yeah.
the time in video games, and I think
Yeah.
that people like almost saw the vision
What they
of
were
what we're
trying
seeing
to
in
do.
Final Fantasy VII Remake right now in that, even though that might not have been intended.
So-
And that sort of
yeah.
led to Final Fantasy becoming this like we're going for
going real.
very
Hyper-real
realistic
all the
With
look.
the cutting edge technology.
even if that, and I think
Yeah.
that was a failing of their like lack of knowledge of 3D. They just didn't quite get the aesthetic across that they intended.
When you look at the 3D renderings for the Super Mario RPG characters, right? Again, that was Square.
Yeah.
They're made up of balls. Like
Yeah.
in the game, they're not exactly, but when you see the renderings for like the manual,
manual.
And the marketing materials, they just clumped a bunch of balls together, a bunch of ball shapes to make these characters. So it's like it was a super experimental stage still with anything that was 3D. It was, but what I was going to say was Final Fantasy VI, when I played that for the first time, was right before, because I think it was 2000. It was right before they started coming out with these like CG cutscenes for all these old Final Fantasies and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember the first time I saw one of those for Final Fantasy VI.
That was weird.
It was
man.
really weird. Seeing Terra.
It was very weird.
And I didn't like the way Terra looked. I was
No.
like, this is kind of messed up. Like, she looks like dead or like a doll or something.
Because
was off about it. She's so
Amando's
pale.
art style definitely doesn't work with
Oh,
realism.
no, it doesn't.
No,
It's very different.
And
Very
I've
strange.
always felt like because of the pixel art and stuff, Yoshitaka Amano's stuff does not come across really when you play the game.
No,
Right.
yeah.
Only
It's
if you look
all
at the manual
promotional.
or the box
Yeah.
art or whatever. Yeah.
That's a good point.
And
is that-
Nomura kind of got
the-
the opportunity at the
the-
right time to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
set
the
new-
aesthetic
Yeah.
of the concept art for Final Fantasy 1 through 6 doesn't ever come across in the game. It's like this is an idea for a character, but that's not at all what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
On
you know what though? Even Amano's concept art for Final Fantasy IX is
true.
really not what they.
No, they ended
did.
up going with
Yeah.
what's his name, Hideo Minaba, I think. He did the final character designs, and they were
So it's
very
like
different.
they were in general sweeping terms were still the same characters, but
Yeah.
in the specifics were all so switched around. Like with the first, I think that was one of the first pieces of art of his that I saw after Final Fantasy VI. I guess that is was like the Zidane, and like he looked so feminine and
Yeah.
sweepy, and it was just like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
This was the concept art, and then they made this.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that was a good point to bring up, because I remember seeing those cutscenes from all those Final Fantasy games they did on PlayStation when they ported them, and I was like, wow, Amano's art style just does not translate well to this like 3D realistic
Kind of
thing.
creepy.
It just it's off-putting. It
I
feels
love
weird.
just talking about it. I think this stuff's great,
Oh,
but
sure.
like as art,
If you're going to
then
like
you-
faithfully represent his art
Yeah.
in a game, that's not the way to do it.
no, it would be like I don't know, which actually someone is doing this, but representing Van Gogh's art style. There's a documentary that's apparently one of the first painted documentaries ever. So like they painted
Right.
every frame in like
Yeah.
Van Gogh's style.
I remember
And it's
when they
about
were
Vincent van Gogh.
recruiting artists for that.
Yeah,
piece.
but I don't know how long that took him. But
Gosh,
yeah,
man.
it's like it
It'd take
works
forever.
great for the medium that it's in. But then you start moving those things around, and it's like,
Yeah.
what the crap?
That's strange.
Yeah, it's really weird. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, that anime, and even the one you're talking about, on the Blu-ray, the Denzel episode,
Yeah.
like that look for Final Fantasy VII always felt good to me, and like Crisis Core isn't bad. I think Crisis Core, because it's more of like a PSP game, it doesn't have that hyper realism to it. But the cutscenes tried to definitely go there. And I would say that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is still retaining like the anime like eye proportions and things. But so like I don't think that when I look at the Final Fantasy VII Remake that I feel like, oh, everything looks so hyper real. I look at those characters and they don't look like real people. So I think to some extent they're trying to do that, but I think that texture-wise, color, and that sort of thing, they could probably back off a bit and
I feel
make
like
it feel a little better.
For the remake, Barrett actually looks significantly more real than Cloud does for the remake.
Sure.
This version of Barrett is the most like, oh, that could be a guy.
Yeah.
Where even in Advent Children, it was like, no fetching way.
Yeah.
Nobody's built like that. Nobody looks like that. And they, so.
Barrett's one that they redesigned, from the Advent Children model.
I'm very interested to see, because that's really early build stuff that they were showing then. It'll be very interesting to see on the 30th anniversary event that they're doing how far the visuals have come since then, and kind of like what they have sort of like finagled and changed and kind of fixed, and how that final look comes together. Who knows?
Yeah.
Cloud and Smash Brothers, that's the Cloud.
That's a good look for him.
That's a really good look.
I really
actually.
like the model for Cloud in Smash Brothers. I think that's a good aesthetic for the game. Even a little bit, not as much, but a little bit in the new Dissidia game they have. Like that feels a little bit closer as well. But
By the way, when I think some more art has been shown, not really arts, but maybe like the figurines that Square Enix makes of Cloud have come out a few months ago.
That's right. The
And
Kai
they look
Arts
really
figures.
good, right? They look really nice. But Cloud's sword is significantly thinner. And this is something I pointed out a few days ago, but I was rewatching the 2015 December, the PSX footage of the actual battle sequence. No.
When he's running around, right?
Yeah, maybe it was. Maybe it was the original E3
environments.
trailer. From
no, I think the
2015.
E3 trailer was they just showed him from behind. and
That's
then they
right. That
announced
was
it.
all.
Yeah.
Okay, so then it was the gameplay footage.
Yeah.
Where he's running around, and it's as he's escaping the reactor after they've planted the bombs and all that stuff. But you see him running from behind, and you see his sword on his back, and like in Final Fantasy VII, the original game, they don't even show him with his sword most of the time.
Yeah, they show
Yeah.
the
It's just
character running
him,
around.
and so it's fine, and it looks fine. You're controlling a person. When you have that big of a sword, and when you don't have this Final Fantasy 15 thing going, where everything just kind of materializes when you need it, and it just disappears when you don't need it, you have to have him carrying it. That sword. Go back and watch that footage again. You're basically just watching a sword walk around that has like one shoulder poking out, like a few strands of hair up top, and like that's it. And you see just this, you're controlling a sword running around all the time. So I feel like that's why they've changed kind of that.
It also makes me wonder
The
if
size
they're
of the
going to
sword.
stick with the Buster Sword for an extended period of time, or because the Buster Sword is
You
just one
ditch
sword.
it after.
And it's-
there's so
yeah,
many
it's like
different
it's like
swords.
literally the worst
So-
weapon in the game.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It's like Skyrim, right? It's like you want to look like the Dragonborn, but then you'd be wearing the worst like
You do.
iron armor in the game.
Yeah.
But
That's a very good
I
point to
wonder
bring
if
up.
they're
I
going to
wonder.
keep him
Games
with
do
that
that.
sword throughout the game because it's so iconic, or if that's going to switch up.
That's a good
Or if
question.
they'll make the other swords he gets kind of still look like the Buster Sword, even as
Isn't his sword
different.
in Advent Children a little thinner? The one that breaks
He
apart.
carries it
Oh,
on his,
it's a
on his
different-
back.
you're right,
He
it's
doesn't
a
carry it
different one.
on his back like this. It's
It's
in a
on
pouch
his-
thing.
I almost
his
feel like
back.
it's
Yeah.
a
And
little
and it
skinnier.
folds into itself. So he has it just, and he kind of busts it out, and it like folds.
If
out.
ever there was a
I think
weapon
it's a
design
bit
that could
skinnier.
not be realized in real life, it was that one. Gosh dang
The
it.
7 swords in
No,
one.
but on the point that you're saying, like I remember watching that with you and feeling the same way. But now I'm curious to look at Zach running around in Crisis Core because
Oh,
he
'cause he
has
had
it
that.
on his back, and it's pretty big in that one. It seems
Be
to me like
interesting to
the camera angle is closer on Cloud in the footage
Yeah.
that they've shown from
Whereas it was further
from the
away.
remake.
Well, they showed him
And he's
navigating some very
smaller.
tight spaces.
Yeah, 'cause
squeezing
he's
through those
squeezing
tunnels,
through.
and then, but even when he was in
Yeah.
the street, I guess
He still
It was
took
still
up
pretty close.
a pretty large amount of space on the screen, and from what I remember in Crisis Core, the character's a little smaller. The camera's back a little bit more.
you can actually see
But-
their feet because you couldn't see Cloud's feet, so the sword was just floating in the air.
Yeah,
Anyways,
it's
it'll be
funny.
interesting to see. Got a couple weeks.
Yep.
We'll see what they do, but at least we now know that the intended aesthetic was anime, not realism. So
Which shows in like their portraits and stuff when
Yeah.
they level up and you see all that art.
Oh yeah, and then the final concept character designs that we see from Nomura, they look
yeah.
the most anime of I think any Final Fantasy character designs we've ever seen.
Yeah. Yep.
Alrighty. Well, okay. So that moves
Speaking
us
of-
straight into a brand new interview with Tetsuya Nomura. He's talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake and Kingdom Hearts 3, and he's telling Weekly Famitsu that they still have a ways to go. And I'll read just a little bit.
Yeah.
This is actually a decent translation. I went because we've been burned by some bad translations lately.
Yeah.
So I went through and double checked I found the Japanese translation. And it's a good translation. So these last few paragraphs are the most important. This first one about Kingdom Hearts 3. What is the state of Kingdom Hearts 3's development? While I can't make sweeping statements because the development process is different from what we've done so far, which is interesting,
Unreal
there
Engine
are
4.
there are still worlds untouched. Production is progressing on unannounced worlds in a state. So I don't know what that means. If there's
Emperor's
worlds they
New
haven't
Groove.
done in Kingdom Hearts before, yeah, Emperor's New Groove.
Emperor's New Groove, man. It's going to be there.
Production is progressing on unannounced worlds in a state that we cannot show them off. In terms of the state of development, there is still some way to go. So Kingdom Hearts 3, he's saying there's
Still some way to
worlds that
go.
aren't done yet.
Yeah.
Which
That's a problem if it's going to come out this year.
if it is,
Which would mean it's not coming out this year, probably.
it's so anyways, so still some way to go. And then Final Fantasy VII Remake, what's the state of its development? We're steadily progressing on production. While we are making them, I apologize that the wait has been a bit longer for Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm very sorry, but to that degree, I will make a game that will meet your expectations.
what he always
Last
says.
year,
extremely Japanese thing.
last year, I didn't put out much information on either title, but this year, I want to show our progress at an event somewhere. The release of the titles themselves still have a way to go. But there are many titles releasing this year if you can wait for any surprises. So,
That's not
that's really vague. That whole
sounding
thing is very vague.
2017 to me. I
don't know.
still think it's likely that the game would come out this year because whether the director likes it or not, the company has an agenda to push.
I feel like they both
they
have
will
to.
release an unfinished game, as we saw with Final Fantasy 15.
I feel like if
They
7
will do it.
Remake is not out this year, I would be really surprised.
Me too.
Kingdom Hearts 3, I could almost see being bumped into January, February, March of
Next year.
2018.
I could see it being next year.
Yeah, definitely. I think that
But these quotes do that. I mean, that does cast some doubt on whether Final Fantasy 7 can
But
make
you know,
it this year. Or
he
not.
ends it saying like, if please wait for some surprises, basically, and
So he's just throwing shade over us.
yeah,
and
it's like
oh, it's coming.
Yeah, like
next
I'm not really
month.
showing anything, but like I don't know. So
yeah, I would be very surprised if they missed this 30th anniversary and
It's just too
20th
big of a
anniversary of
year.
Final Fantasy VII
Yeah.
to not release the game. I would be very surprised.
big of a year
Um,
for it.
Yeah.
You know, that's not to say that I like the fact that they would, like make sure it comes out this year. I would rather see delays. I would rather see them take 3 or 4 years on development than have them get it out just because this is the year of the 20th anniversary, right? But I still feel pretty confident that it's going to come out this year.
Here's a big question: will Final Fantasy, since Final Fantasy VII is episodic, will the Final Fantasy VII Episode 1 have DLC?
Jeez.
Are they going to continue?
I would
to
say
add- it's already
they will
episodic.
probably have cosmetic DLC.
Okay.
I would say
I
they
guess I'm
can't-
thinking the Final
I don't
Fantasy
think they can
15
pass
level.
that up.
Right. They'll have that DLC.
I don't even know what to say if they announced that. Final
I
Fantasy
think
Remake
they
Part
will.
1, Episode 1.
DLC.
The Crisis Core outfit.
The Zack.
The well, I don't know. You can always bring in like the Muramasa or a Mage Masher, like
the
they did in
weapons.
15, and just have a different weapon.
See, now that's
not
weird.
to change
That's
the-
weird to me because they always use Final Fantasy VII weapons and accessories and
as
and
incentives
armor
for other
as
games.
incentives
for
to
other games.
Oh, you can pre-order and get the
Yeah.
Masamune. Isn't that sweet?
Yeah.
But there's no way they could use like the Masamune as like a pre-order bonus. That's just in the world that would be retarded.
It's
like you're
gonna
carrying
be-
around Sephiroth's sword killing people. Like that
It's
would
gonna
just be retarded.
It's gonna be Cindy's like a pinup of Cindy on the Buster Sword. or the sprites of all the characters on the Buster Sword.
Gosh, dude.
I don't
That's
know.
true.
I
They might
feel like
come out
we're at
with
a
like
point.
a car or a motorcycle that like they have Audi sponsor the game.
Yeah. Can you imagine though Masamune versus Masamune, dude?
Yeah. Who would
We've
win?
always wondered.
I have not wondered. I don't want to. I don't want
It's a
to see it.
1-to-1
I just feel like-
matchup.
I feel like if nothing else, pre-order DLC, right? Like stuff to encourage people to pre-order
Go to
is
GameStop and you'll
kind
get.
of just par for the course at this point, which is bullcrap. But
But you don't expect story-oriented DLC because I don't.
Snowboarding
but it's
DLC.
Square
Snowboarding,
Enix. No, that should
Golden
just be in the
Saucer
game.
DLC.
That should just be in the game.
They're not going to get to
Yeah.
Golden Saucer in this game.
Well, probably
No, they
episode 2
won't.
then. Huh?
But
But exactly.
one of the episodes will just be the Golden Saucer, just you watch.
Episode
Just the
2,
whole-
Golden Saucer.
Part 3, Golden Saucer.
Oh my gosh! All the
I
mini
actually
games.
really am.
And the dating sim,
Interested.
full-blown dating sim. Full-blown.
You have 2 girls to choose from.
Not me, Yuffie, dude. Or
You're
Kate Sith. You got to throw in that extra, like...
Oh jeez.
I am really interested to see
That's
what they'll
funny.
do with the Gold Saucer in this. I think they could make
Yeah, me
it
too.
a lot of fun. Like that's a really good excuse.
I wouldn't
to
mind
make-
if they change entire mini games
Yeah.
there and like take
They
out
should.
snowboarding and put in something completely different.
They could still have snowboarding, especially if they made it good this time. But like I think that they could have lots more games. You know, they could even have arcades of old Square games, kind of like they
Oh,
did
that'd
with
be
the
sweet.
King's Tale,
Yeah.
right? Or like
And
Rad
Justice Monsters
Racer,
5.
this Rad Racer,
Maybe Just
and
Mom.
a bunch of other games
Yeah.
that they came out with before Final Fantasy.
That would be really
You
cool.
know what?
If they had like a well, they probably wouldn't do this. Like they probably wouldn't have any of their full blown RPGs in it because they want you to download that
Right, for
separately
$20,
on the.
yeah.
Right,
But-
right. Well, what if you
Even-
could?
What if they had
And then-
like Xenogears in
DLC.
there or something?
Xenogears, there you go.
They probably wouldn't do
I-
that for an arcade, but
Okay, I would say, and this is probably going to piss a lot of people off. It's a very controversial opinion.
I'm ready for the
Warn
dislikes.
everybody right now,
ready for the dislikes.
Get your
I
buckle up
actually
on the
think-
dislike
buckle
button.
up.
I actually
Wait.
think if they had wait for it. If they had a tie-in for the Chocobo racing that was mobile phone based.
Dislikes through the roof.
No.
Interesting.
So you don't do that like actively in the game, but you could get the results of your success
on
Chocobo farming.
Yeah. And then it links to your
phone.
Final Fantasy
Please
VII account.
stop giving them ideas. Just don't.
You know, if they did Golden Saucer with all these mini games that were available on your phone, I mean, you don't have to use it, guys. Come on. Unlike
That's why they're making this game because of Golden Saucer mini games.
Unclick the unlike button.
That have unclick the unlike.
But they already have those on your phone. There's already a snowboarding Final Fantasy VII
right,
phone
and that
game,
motorcycle one,
and it's not very good. But you know, it would be very interesting if they decided to go, cross-platform to your phones in that way within the game. And
well, I mean, these guys made the Cyber Connect 2 or Cyber 2 Connect.
Cyber Connect 2.
Cyber Connect 2.
The company, yeah.
Made the motorcycle
the mini, I keep saying mini bike. I meant motorcycle.
Did they do the snowboarding one?
I don't know.
No. Probably not.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know, dude. It's freaking Square. They know they need to make money off of mobile stuff.
And they make tons of mobile
pre-orders.
games, mobile titles.
I don't know.
No, they'll do it.
Okay, so they will do something stupid. We know that much. Let's just hope that it's not that stupid.
You know what I would like, actually, is if they had, like a different model for Cloud that was, like an optional, like, you could play as this version of Cloud, right?
Oh,
I
interesting.
think that would be kind of interesting, actually. As long as it wouldn't be animation breaking, it would still have to be something that works proportionally.
Right. Yeah, it seems like the new Sonic game that's coming next year is going to have both an older classic model of Sonic and the newer
edgier.
one.
I was just going to say, in Metal Gear, they have those models you can unlock of the original Snake, like the PlayStation 1 Snake you can run around with. If they did that for Cloud, that could be really funny.
That would be hilarious.
Cloud's original PS1 model running around in the Final Fantasy VII Remake world.
All 200 polygons.
Yeah.
I know Nintendo every now and then does throwbacks to their Pixel Mario kind of stuff. Like in Mario RPG, you can run behind a secret wall, and just for like 10 seconds in the game, you pop out as 8-bit Mario, and you can jump around. And then the timer goes down, and you become normal again. But... So that would be kind of fun.
Okay, so Final Fantasy VII Remake DLC. I mean, that's an interesting thing about Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC. So
because that's one game. The
yeah.
other games didn't have it because they were all PS2. This will be the first big, modern DLC era Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
Fetch.
So,
and I've heard that there's going to be customizable outfits that you will actually be able to collect clothes throughout the game.
Will
and
they
you
have
can
effects,
customize,
or will they just be cosmetic?
kind of like the drive function? I don't think they will. I've heard that it will just be cosmetic, but they'll also have something.
Do we know if they're doing the drive thing in this game?
I don't know if we know that.
Have they shown that in the footage?
I don't think so. They've shown a train. You can get on a train apparently and just ride it around while you're shooting stuff. I think that's one of the signs. I don't know which. Maybe Anastasia. Did Disney make Anastasia?
No, that was DreamWorks. I think.
Well, somehow there's a train in the whole
thing. Great Mouse Detective. I don't know.
Have they done Great Mouse Detective in Kingdom Hearts yet?
No. Or
They done
Rescuers? No, they haven't done any of that.
Dude, Rescuers Down Under. The Golden
Rescuers
Eagle.
Down Under.
That would be sick.
Salamander.
That movie was the best.
Golden
That
Eagle.
was so sweet.
I remember we had The Rescuers,
Oh, yeah.
but I always wanted The Rescuers Down Under. And
Yeah.
I'd tell my mom I want to watch that. She'd put the other movie on. I was like, no, this movie sucks. I want The Rescuers Down
Dude, Rescuers
Under.
Down Under was
The first Rescuers
sick.
is really
Way sicker
gloomy.
movie.
It's like really gloomy.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good movie. Like I'm sure I'd appreciate it more as an adult than
Yeah.
as a kid. But there's something about that fetching eagle. Like,
Yeah, dude.
I want to fly the eagle so bad. I gotta watch this movie so I can
the
pretend
opening
I'm
shots
flying
where
the
it's
eagle.
like flying
Yeah.
like super fast across the outback.
Yeah, gorgeous.
So sick.
That also reminds me, there was it An American Tale, I think? Where it was
Five
Five
West.
Five Goes West
is the second
was the
one.
better
Yeah.
one.
But,
The American Tale was the first one.
Oh, the first one.
And that
I
was
liked
gloomy and was really
Yeah, I
very
liked the
similar
first movie.
to The Rescuers, but then
Yeah.
Five Goes West was all just fun and go
Yeah,
beat 'em up.
That's true. That was
because it was all about like
There are no cats in America.
Jewish
Yeah,
Yes,
refugees.
exactly. From World War II.
That was actually a really good movie. I watched that a lot as a kid.
Oh yeah.
That's back
Somewhere
when
out
like
there, dude.
Secret of Nim. Nymph?
Yeah,
Or Nim?
Nims,
Nim.
M-N-I-M-H, Rats of Nim,
And like Dark Crystal, and like kids' movies were like
They were
pretty,
nice, dude.
pretty dark.
It's true, yeah, they were.
Cold War, dude, is
The
rough
American
times.
Tale is one I totally like now. I haven't seen it since I was like 8, but
Yeah, they're good movies, man. Good movies.
Out there.
Yeah, dude, that's absolutely.
Oh my gosh! I guess there's a lot they can still touch on in Kingdom Hearts 3. I
there
wonder
is
if
a
they would
lot. And
make
Emperor's New
entire-
Groove. They have
So
to put
what he's
Emperor's
saying
New
here
Groove in.
about worlds being unfinished, I
Yeah,
also wonder
that's
if some of
crazy.
those are just DLC worlds anyways.
Ooh, interesting.
See, that's the
then the
thing
game could still come out.
that will kind of make or break
More
this
recent.
game for me. Is like we've revisited Cinderella a bunch of times, and like Beauty and the Beast a bunch of times. It's like I don't want to see those worlds again. Please, for the
Right.
love of fetch, don't give us another Maleficent storyline. Like we don't need Sleeping
she's
Beauty
evil,
again.
dude.
Fetch.
Yeah.
Like please, just do entirely new, untouched Disney worlds.
Like
That was
Frozen?
one of the things
Is that
that-
what you're saying? Like
Yeah,
Frozen?
Like Frozen. Yeah, Mike's proponent of Frozen. Yeah, you heard it. But in the very first Kingdom Hearts, it was the stories, and in Kingdom Hearts 2, it was the straight to DVD sequels
Yeah.
that they made in the 90s, and that's the story. I don't think they could have another story to go back to
freaking
these
hope
guys
not.
again.
Well, there's a lot of Aladdin
could always
stuff. I'll
make
tell you that
stuff
much.
Yeah,
They
they've
made
done
a whole
Aladdin a
TV
few
show.
times, too.
But I love Aladdin. I
Like,
love
Aladdin's
Agrabah,
cool.
dude.
Aladdin is cool,
Yeah.
but fetch. There's so many sweet movies you can do.
I know, Emperor's New Groove.
Have they done Jungle Book yet?
No, I don't believe so. No.
Jungle Book would be sweet.
That would be really sweet.
Freaking Sword in the Stone. Have they done that yet?
Nope.
Sword in the Stone's freaking awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Why haven't they done Sword and Stone yet? That seems like the most obvious.
Sword in the Stone's like
Like,
my
that would be
favorite.
the
My
sweetest one.
favorite.
Keyblade in
Disney
the Stone,
movie.
man.
Keyblade in the Stone.
I know it'd be perfect, right?
Yeah, I don't think they've
Sword
done
in the
that.
Stone would be sweet. Rescuers would be sweet.
Yeah.
There's so many really, really good Disney animation properties that they haven't.
I would
touched.
not be surprised if Moana was
Moana?
somehow in this game. If Disney has anything to
Yeah.
do with it, I
Yeah.
would be surprised if that might be a reason why something's not done yet. They're like, oh crap, we got to do this one.
You have to do
Disney's-
Moana.
I mean, I don't know how much
Yeah.
Disney is really involved in this stuff. Kingdom Hearts confuses me because they're like Rogue, dude. It's like
It seems like Disney
seems like they
doesn't
have a lot of autonomy,
say much,
and
yeah.
Disney's so controlling about all their stuff.
Yeah,
But
So
not.
I'm really confused that Kingdom Hearts exists at all.
especially since they change the original stories a lot. Like
Yeah, they do.
they make a lot of alterations to kind of like
To put Sora in the middle of everything
yeah
that happens.
they change the stories quite a bit. So.
Yeah, it's true.
I mean, they like sort of resemble like the major points of the story, but
Roughly.
they take a lot of what do you call them?
Artistic liberties.
Liberties, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
But yeah, they could do additional worlds as DLC, and that wouldn't be difficult at all. You just go in your gummy ship and just put a new thing there. You don't need to like weave it into the world the way you would other games.
It's just,
literally
this
just
has
a planet. that you
Somebody
go
went
to.
here and screwed this up, so just go
Yep.
fix it.
Boom, there's Heartless here now all of a sudden for who knows why, and boom, go kill them all, beat the boss, and experience that world's Disney story.
Yeah. So wait, so you think they'll do the gummy ship thing for sure? Then?
I don't know. They did it in the first two. I
guess that's
say
how
they
they
would.
get from
In
place to
fact,
place.
now that I think about it, Chip and Dale are in the game. They're just not story characters. They control the gummy ship. I'm remembering. Chip and Dale are the pilots of the gummy ship. That's literally
Dude,
all they
that
do.
fetching
There's
show-
nothing else.
That show that had them and like
Rescue
Baloo-
Rangers?
Rescue.
Oh, are you thinking of
yeah,
Tailspin?
Tailspin, dude. The Jungle Book characters.
That was
Oh.
a sick show. Dude.
That was a great show.
That's
Spin it,
true.
would
They
you
could
spin it,
do.
would you spin it, spin
They
it,
could
spin it?
do a Tailspin one instead of just straight Jungle Book, and
Yeah.
be like
Tailspin's already like a medley of a bunch of different
true.
characters, so
That's
dude, that would be cool.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways, lots of
Tailspin was
material
the
there.
sickest cartoon ever.
Dude, the kid
Oh
would
my
go out and like
gosh.
surf on the air behind.
Yeah,
the
dude.
plane.
I was so
Dude,
sure that was
so
real.
cool.
I was so sure you could do that
so
in real
sick,
life.
dude. I wanted to do that so bad.
Oh my
And it would
God.
just collapse.
It like
Yeah.
folded out, right?
That's
and then
right.
and then he'd
He'd,
put
like,
it down like a fan, and then
Yeah.
he'd put it down, and it
stayed on his feet. It stayed
Dude,
on
that
his feet
was
every
that
time.
was
That was the
sick.
coolest
Kit.
thing
His
ever.
name was Kit.
Kit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kit.
Kit.
That
Yeah,
dude, that was the
Baloo was the
coolest.
pilot.
That was the coolest kid
Oh
ever.
man.
Want to be that kid so
Because he'd
bad.
put his hat backwards, which you probably have to do if
That would
you're
make sense. You'd lose your
outside.
hat.
Yeah, you'd lose your hat.
Don't want to lose your
You'd
hat.
lose it anyways.
It's a lot of money to keep buying hats.
Oh,
like that.
fit. Kingdom Hearts, man. There's so much potential there. But yeah, they're really autonomous. I really don't know that Disney gives a fetch what they do, honestly.
Which is that's why it seems like that, right? But
Yeah.
that just doesn't sound like Disney to me.
No,
the
that's
Disney
not
that's
Disney at
managing
all.
Marvel and is
Yeah.
managing Star Wars
And
is
Pixar and they would not be like that.
So I did actually have a thought about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Is that I wonder if one of the reasons why it's episodic is so that they can get a game out this year where they may have not actually been able to get
like a whole thing done.
Done like this year, but if they break it up, they can have a manageable chunk.
It's like,
of work
Fetch, we
year.
decided to do this thing that was the smartest idea ever. Way too late. How can we make it come out at the time it should have come out? We'll just do part one.
Part one.
Okay.
Because
we'll make more
money. I was thinking about this, and there have been people, I can't remember the specific interviews, but saying like, oh, it's just too big. It's just too huge. We can't do this as one game. It's too huge.
Yes,
but
I've heard that.
what I thought was like, oh my gosh, so then are you literally saying that games like Final Fantasy VII are impossible to make nowadays?
You cannot make a game to that scale today.
Final Fantasy 16 could never, in its wildest dreams, hope to be as large of a world or as extensive as Final Fantasy VII. Is that what they are saying?
That's freaking stupid.
Because that's weird when you frame it that way.
It is
because
interesting.
that game was made 20 years ago.
Because, you look at Final Fantasy 15, and we've talked about this on previous podcasts, it has a larger, world in terms of, the space you can actually traverse and run around in.
Yeah.
But that region is, I don't know, I'll just call it 20 square miles or something.
It's like a small island.
It's a small island. And actually, I'm looking at the world map when I was doing my discussion video this week, and that world feels unbelievably small. Like, you have Graulia, the capital city of the Niflheim Empire, and then just, ice tundras everywhere. And then you have Tenebrae up here, but it's like, where are the cities? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's just take America as a country. How many cities?
You don't just have massive empty spaces between a couple of cities.
But even the geographical region, you look at the size of the mountains in that map, and it's and you go over to Lucius. Lucius is the size of, I don't know, Honolulu or something. It's a small geographical area, but that's a huge nation. Especially when they talk about the Cordo country, which has even smaller islands on it.
So it's almost like something that could take place on the scale of just maybe half of Japan,
New York,
or something.
yeah,
being,
or
the whole
less.
world
It feels
that
like Japan basically size. That's basically what it feels like. It's that's a small region.
Yeah.
And in comparison to, say, the world of Final Fantasy VII, which is
a whole
continent.
It
feels like a continent.
Now, you could also argue there aren't very many towns or cities in that. But I think the idea still is, there's still more. There's still more in Final Fantasy VII than there are in 15.
You legitimately feel you're traversing a continent.
Yeah.
Exactly. It feels bigger.
And
by a lot.
That's actually a thought I've had. Okay, I'm wondering if I should say this. If you guys disagree, then cut it out.
Ready.
But we've talked about the idea of making a game.
Right.
And the thought I've had as I've thought about that over the last few weeks is that I would love to go pixel art route because of the fact that you could make a world map with many towns and cities in it, and be able to do that because it's not
the level of detail wouldn't be
the assets are small,
right?
So you can add more and more and more to them and have still.
I agree. I like the pixel art approach. Well, okay, actually, because
better.
What this whole thing makes me think is, have we put the visual presentation so far ahead of the actual game that we've actually hindered our ability to make these big games,
expansive games
that there is a market for,
which seems
and
it seems to be
at the cost of having to put freaking every little label on every little item in the store or whatever, just this excessive detail because people demand that.
Now you can't have.
And now it's
stores.
Give and take.
You can't have, let's say, a realistic topography and geography of your world where towns and cities would be spread around and realistically in a game of the size and scope and graphical fidelity of Final Fantasy 15. That's not possible.
Or
It's
even
not- it would be too big.
Even Skyrim, because
Yeah, even
Skyrim
Skyrim,
is
yeah.
really just a sub region
There's
of a continent.
15 people living in
Right.
cities.
Exactly,
In
not that many
huge
people.
cities.
And then you don't have to travel that far to get a massive environmental change. So it's like if you walk 30 minutes to the north, you're going to be where it's like permanently ice cold, snowy everywhere.
Yeah.
You walk 30 minutes to the south, you're in completely different conditions,
Right.
like Washington or
It's
something.
not.
Rainy forests or even
They do a good
wooded
job
areas.
of masking that transition.
It transitions very well,
but it's still so.
But when you
small.
think about it, it's
and
it's
and
true.
it doesn't. It's not realistic in any way. And I feel like if we could just return back to a pixel art style that we all used to love and that many people still love, you could have like a representation of a world that feels realistic in that way.
Yeah.
And even if you did the world map in the style of older Final Fantasy games where you're big and you can traverse this huge continent, but you have a bunch of cities and a bunch of towns, and I don't know. I would like to try something like that.
Chrono Trigger did a
Yeah.
pretty good job of, especially in that very beginning place where you're at. I mean, it may technically be like one city at like the Millennial Fair or whatever, but there's like 4 or 5 different villages, places that you can enter in that comprise this.
Oh, because
one
they show
area.
the separate buildings
instead of just one. Exactly, instead of just like one thing, it's like no, here's like this separate, but they still do the whole world map thing and.
Yeah. No, it is weird, like the question of scale in games. Like,
Games used to be so big, now they're so small. It doesn't make sense.
But they're
You
claiming
think
they're
we
bigger
could
than
make
ever.
bigger-
That's
exactly.
the weird thing. Like,
They're telling
And technically,
you,
it's true.
Yeah.
Like because
physical
the
spaces are
size
larger.
of the maps and the amount of time it takes you to get somewhere has gone up and up and up.
right? But
But-
the feel is so small.
But by doing that and making it like more and more realistic, the expectation of realism sort of like makes it you see how small it
you
really
have to
is.
condense.
Like
Yeah.
I think the best, and I always talk about The Witcher 3, but the best job of an open world that feels appropriate in scale that I've ever seen is The Witcher. But still, it only really covers an area that has like one major city in it. And that is an appropriate size for the time period and everything. And they've got Oxenfurt, which is sort of like an offshoot of that, that's a little smaller. But mostly it's like, well, you're only kind of confined to this sort of space in the world map. You see the world map, you see how big it is, but like you're really only in that portion of it there.
Yeah.
And then when you leave this place, you travel really far to be in this portion, and then you go to Skellige, and that's like way over here.
That's kind of how
the
Final
bridges
Fantasy
in
12
between.
has been so far. It's like you don't feel like you went that far, but it's like, oh, here you go. You're all the way down here now.
Yeah, because it just skips all of that land in between the open world regions they made.
Well, in some ways, it's like taking Tolkien's approach, where for all the world building and everything that Tolkien did, you don't know what the whole world comprised.
It's true.
You just know,
you just know
the area
that
that is of importance. And I think sometimes in RPG stories, the story tends to be like of global importance, right? It's like we need to save the entire world from something, and therefore I guess we should see the entire world versus this is only important for these people here. But that's fine. That's fine. It doesn't have to be God you're fighting every time. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like the world is going to end, but it could be that this country or this sub-region is going to end. I don't know.
Well, it makes it feel bigger when you look at Tolkien's map and you see Middle Earth, and you're like, wait, what's up here? Well, what's down here? What's over here? And he's got arrows that are like, hey, here's the Easterlings, and the Sea of Rune is over here.
And using people's imaginations to like compliment.
Here's up north. But you don't really see it, but it makes it feel bigger because you don't know something.
Yeah.
Whereas when you take things like Final Fantasy 15, it feels like everything's taking place on an island because you can see everything. If Tolkien did that, if he mapped out the entire continent, maybe it would feel more like this little island place.
Yeah.
But instead it feels huge because you don't know what's way over there.
And the other thing that's funny about it too is that they actually have like on the they'll have your waypoint, but they list underneath that the amount of miles it is away from you. So when you're traveling from Lucius to Accordo, to Altissia, that island is actually only like 7.5 miles away.
Dude, that's like...
this country is separated by 8 miles of ocean from this one. And it's like, what the fetch? You could like see that almost.
Yeah, that's like...
Yeah.
Freak, that's like Catalina Island off of
Yeah.
California. Like that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
right there. Like that's not
it's
far.
so close.
And they're
Yeah.
going to pretend that it's like, oh,
It's like,
Asia.
we're
and,
going to
you know,
another
North
country.
America.
I feel like
crazy.
you know, Red Dead Redemption did a similar thing where you did the Skyrim approach of having your biomes essentially change. Your climate changes like fairly rapidly. You don't have to travel that far to get to like see snow, for example, where you're theoretically along the border with like Mexico, but you have these sub-regions, right? It doesn't take that long to get to them, so you like kind of it makes things feel less monotonous, I guess, by still having this space. But I almost feel like they're constrained by like how far could an actual person travel in real time.
That is the
to
difficult
get somewhere, because
thing to work
like
around.
when you're running around the map of Final Fantasy VII, you're not under the impression that this is real time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't really think
It's
your
a-
character is as big
it's
as a
an
mountain.
abstract.
And is
Exactly.
running
It's a
around.
representation
Exactly.
of the idea of going somewhere, or the idea of being able to go anywhere or explore or whatever you want to do. Like when a chocobo is running up and over the mountain.
Yeah.
You don't
You know.
you don't assume.
You're not like, just boost it straight up this mountain. So
and that's
it's a
what a lot
problem.
of games did in that time. It's like
Yeah.
we can't represent the battles as we see them in our head necessarily.
Right.
So we'll do an abstract interpretation
Yeah,
of that with a
and-
turn-based battle system.
And that's art.
More
Yeah,
of
that's art.
Right.
That's art right there. It's
Yeah.
not just pure real. And that's why when you try and make it real, like all of a sudden when you've got this realistic Final Fantasy VII Remake and Cloud's running around and people are literally shooting him with guns, it's like, okay, I got it in the RPG system.
Yeah.
Why is he alive now?
Right,
Tell me why.
right.
Tell me how he survived these hundreds of gunshots in your super
or why
realistic
he's
world
even
that you
using a
just
sword
made.
in this world.
Or yeah,
But-
yeah.
Yeah, I think that
They're shooting themselves in the foot.
well, like we were just looking at like the like Bahamut summon, for example, and you're in a turn-based battle and you just disappear, and then it comes around and blasts out a crater.
It's like,
and
where
then you're
were
back
you?
and you're fine. So Final Fantasy 15 approaches that problem of like, okay, how would
It
that work?
picks you up.
Oh, they would like, or whatever they do, right?
Right.
But it's
It is sick,
It's-
though.
it's
It is
cool.
in Final
I'm
Fantasy
really
15.
cool.
They
I'm
did that
sure.
really well.
it works really well, but I feel like I don't know. There's something there with like that's as real as you could possibly probably get with
Yeah.
that, right? Like if you were really summoning something, Rama would be like, "Watch out, dude." and then like, all right,
And
Okay.
you know and along that point, they do a good job of showing like the like physical consequence of that. It's all burned and scarred,
Right.
But
It's
eventually
It
it
just kinda
fades
fades away.
and it goes away. It wouldn't like stay there.
there's just
permanently
that
like it would in
a
real life.
little bit more, at least for me, cognitive dissonance with the pure realistic route,
Sure.
because it's like
'Cause it's
if
not
you're
real.
accounting for
It's
this,
not
why
even
didn't you account
close.
for this? Yeah,
Exactly.
like in Final Fantasy VII, I'm okay with Cloud using a sword because, dude, that's sweet, and you would totally chop that guy so hard,
Chop him in the neck.
chop him in the neck.
Or chop.
But
It's chopping the head.
plus, swords are
Yeah.
cool. Humans will never get beyond swords being like the theoretically coolest weapon of all time. 'Cause guns feel cheap, right? There's no honor in a gun.
No honor in shooting
No.
somebody.
Like, go watch the last Samurai where they talk about that.
I
Oh, what is it?
think-
Some movie where they talk
or
about
is
like
it, no, it's Star Wars, dude. It's not civilized.
maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But I don't know. There's something about it being abstract in 7, the original 7,
Yeah.
that it's like I'm accepting it, totally accepting everything they're throwing at me. I'm accepting Kate Sith being right there and doing what he's doing.
Yep.
But then the more real you get, the more like these things start to feel conflicting to me.
Yeah.
To me at
Yeah,
least,
me
which is
too.
a challenge. So I think it drags other things along with it, like the world has to get smaller, or
Yeah.
things just have to follow more rules of real life.
Which is boring, man. It's boring.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think
Now, one way they could fix that, since it is episodic, is that they can have something the scale of like the opening continent work, but it's like
Yeah.
that's the only map in the game, right?
Yeah,
like only
right.
world map in the
Right,
game.
you can't
In the
go
next
else.
game, you won't be able to go back. They'd have to lock
Oh,
you out of that.
because that's too
but
much.
that whole game would be dedicated towards the size
because
of
you don't
this
have
continent.
money for the ferry, dude.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one way they could approach that, to
Fair
make
price
the world
keeps going
feel really big still,
Yeah.
and not have to have like every single map in the game.
No, that's a good
Right.
point.
In it.
And that might be their primary motivation. And it's I guess I just feel like if that is true, if we're really at a point where what the flagship RPGs are nowadays have sacrificed story and world building in one respect to complement it in another, and that probably works for a lot of people. It's too bad, but I feel like open world games can only be so big, And I'd say open world. I mean, like, I don't necessarily mean like the strict definition of open world, but a game where you can explore the world.
Sandbox. A sandbox game.
Or even like for example, Red Dead Redemption does not feel limiting. Even though when you really get down to it, it's like I could ride my horse across this whole thing in an hour. That doesn't make any sense. Like, it's snowing up here now. Now I'm in Mexico here. These people are here, but it's swampy and raining all the time here. These people have like no water and it's desert right here. Like, it makes no sense. But I think that's probably about as much as you can condense that to make spaces not be too spaced out.
Yeah.
Because playing the demo for Final Fantasy 15, I felt like there was just too much time I spent like trying to find something to do in these open areas.
Sure.
I'm like, I'm running along. I want to fight something, dude. I want to fight
Which
something.
is very
like,
realistic.
Where the fetch
if you
is
think
something
about
to
it,
fight.
right?
That is real. Yeah, it is real.
It's very real. But
yeah, because at the same time, you
Games-
don't want to have to get on a horse and ride for 7 real life days in order to get to like the next country.
Exactly.
Like
Right.
that's too big.
Yeah.
That's not enjoyable.
And I feel like that's a problem that realism kind of drags along with it.
Sure.
It's like you want this all to be real and to feel like you really traveled from here to here. So how much can we like squeeze that down but without breaking it from feeling real? Or,
and even if they get it to that sweet spot, kind of like Red Dead or something, it will never feel as big as it did when you were just representing your character in an abstract
I mean, in some ways, it's making the bad stuff about realism better, right? Like in real life, like if we want to go, well, it's not a good example where we live. Let's say if we want to go in the mountains, it would take a long time. We're right there.
No, but if you want to go to Mexico.
But if we wanted to go to the ocean, it would take
Or the ocean.
quite a long time to get there, and most of that time we'd just be like chilling.
So what this
we don't want that
this is interesting because what this conversation is kind of leading me to come to in terms of like my own opinions about the way I like them to be structured is if you're going to have a game where you want the world to feel really huge and expansive, I actually prefer the abstract way of traveling across the world map.
I think I do too.
But if we're gonna, if realism, if we want to retain that as like an aesthetic and people want that, I actually like the approach where you have a fairly large world map, something or field map, I should say, something like kind of like Zelda. But you come into a corridor and then you see him kind of walk and it fades out. And then it leads you into a new map that can look drastically different. And it's like you traveled a long way, right? But you don't have to actually seamlessly blend those together. I think I actually prefer that.
I came to a similar conclusion through my playthrough of Final Fantasy XII because I was looking at the map and I was like, there's no way we covered that much distance. I'm just going here and here. But they do that similar thing where you're in like kind of like you're in a map and you leave and it kind of fades out and it loads the next map and you're there. And it's like sometimes you can literally see, okay, I was here and you see where you're going and you're right there. But other times you go and you're somewhere completely different. Like I left a forest and all of a sudden the next level loaded was freaking snowy mountains. And I was like, what the fetch? And I load the big world map and it's like, oh, you went from here to here. And I didn't know. That was very surprising for me.
So they're like
see.
Subtracting the boring part.
Exactly.
They're like,
so
nothing
it's
really
like,
happened.
For me, I go around and I'm like, oh, look, everywhere I go in this world, there just happens to be a buttload of monsters. But it's like, no, the representation is the parts where there weren't monsters you weren't playing. He was still traveling, though. And all of a sudden, you have now come across a big pocket where there are an unusual amount of monsters, and you fight them, and it's hard to get through. But once you're through that valley, then there's no more monsters for the next day of your journey. And it's still, it works if you think of it in that way.
Yeah. You know, a game that I feel like conveys like large spaces pretty well, and I haven't played very much of it, but I had somebody showing me recently, Ogre Battle 64, and you're controlling your different groups, right? And then they're taking a while to get to this town or wherever they're going on the roads. And I feel like when you're controlling like a large group like that, and they're taking a little while, but there's still something happening because you're managing multiple parties.
Yeah, because there's other groups.
I think that's a little bit of a way around that.
Yeah.
That sort of problem, because you're not just following this party where nothing's happening
while
they're traveling. You're paying
what?
attention to these guys who are
You
fighting.
guys remember
somebody.
the TV show 24?
Yeah.
That's exactly how they did it. There's things happening in different places. So you're not following Jack Bauer as he's flying in a helicopter from New York to LA, because that would have only taken about 15 minutes. But it's like, oh, Jack Bauer is going to do this important thing. Okay, let's see what's happening here. In the meantime, you forgive the time period that it took Jack Bauer to get to LA from New York or DC or wherever the fetch he was. And the short time it took him to get there, because you weren't there, you didn't see it. You were somewhere else during that time period. And so now, Jack's in LA now, and it works, even though it doesn't make sense spatially.
Do they really?
Or temporally.
Do they really travel like?
I remember there was at least one episode where you traveled really far in about 15 minutes, but I can't remember. It's been a decade since I've watched any of that show. But they do it. They pull it off by following different people. So for this time you're here, and for this time you're here, but during this time you don't know what's happening here.
Layering the story to keep it interesting.
And that way, as long as you're not following, and this is hard in a video game, of course, but if you're following one person the whole time, you theoretically should know everything they did. But when you go from different place, from point to point, like say this character's traveling, in the meantime you're somewhere else, when you come back, just like cutting scenes in a movie, you forgive any time that passed. You
like
forgive
in a movie
any
when
spatial,
the conversation seamlessly,
like Inception,
moves from one location to another. It's like,
and somehow they're still talking about it, but it's a change in scene, and maybe you went away for a little bit and came back. It works now because you didn't see it happen, and that's more or less kind of what you're talking about, Mike, where you leave and it fades, and whenever in a movie you have a fade to black transition, you understand that some time or space has changed.
Unless we're talking about Kingsglaive.
Kingsglaive did not use the fade.
Kingsglaive had no idea that that's the purpose of fade. But yeah, I think that like that gets you the feeling of something larger, even though you have smaller maps. It's still the world still feels bigger than these like big sandbox open world games that connect a tundra landscape with a swamp. And you can travel between them in a matter of like 10 minutes. So it's just like
it's cool that you can do it and there aren't load times per se, but you do lose that sense of scale. You lose the scene cut transition. You lose, and in your brain at least, it's like, this isn't all that big.
In a sense, that's sort of like editing, though. It's like this is the video game.
So the open world is a single take. Is the whole movie's one take? It's all one take, and. Whereas the way games used to be made, it's editing. These are scenes, these are cuts.
And I think that there's some people that like maybe don't like that approach because they feel like it's forcing them to go a place that they maybe don't want to go and they saw somewhere else more interesting. As long as the game still is like hitting up its interesting locales, because isn't that a big complaint about 13? Is like I want to go in this town over here, but I can't.
Yeah,
it's blocked. Yeah, right. And so as long as the game is not using that to no, you're going this way. As long as the towns are still connected. I think towns are super important in RPGs.
Totally.
They're really important. They're almost the core of the whole thing. It used to be the way the story progressed. We're in a new town now. What's going on here?
I would say
there's a slightly different.
At first going to seem controversial, but just follow me all the way through the end. I prefer the idea of Final Fantasy XIII's world construction over 15's. But only when you have like real field maps, not field hallways, right? Like you need large spaces with hidden things in them and a reason to explore them. Xenoblade Chronicles is a great example. Xenoblade Chronicles X is the seamless open world thing, but Xenoblade Chronicles X the original Xenoblade Chronicles has these enormous, just gigantic field maps that take you forever to traverse, but you still come to like a sort of a canyon path at the end of it that you go into, and then that fades and loads the next field map. Like I feel like that's kind of the best way to do it in big, more realistic 3D RPGs. But even still, I think there's still a part of me that sort of prefers the I'm a gigantic man walking on a world map. Yeah. That feels, I don't know, it just feels good to me. It feels like I'm going a long distance.
Yeah.
More than any other. Do you feel that games can pull that off nowadays? Like, let's say Final Fantasy 15, in their super realistic graphics, you leave the gas station at the very beginning of the game, and now you're Big Noctis traversing.
You know what?
Do you think that would work?
I think it can, but because I remember playing the
Tales
the two games.
The Tales games kind of do that.
Yeah, the two games that are in the Final Fantasy series actually that have pulled off a world map really well post like PlayStation 1 era are Dissidia. Duodecim, so not the first one, but the second one.
Okay.
It has like world maps where you have the characters running around on the maps.
And like I remember super realistic models.
I remember,
wow.
I mean more
That's
proportioned.
Cool.
I wouldn't call them realistic, but
modern
along the same lines.
Yeah.
that felt good to me. It was. I remember like coming to that section and running around, and I just wanted to continue running around on it because I had missed world maps of that nature in Final Fantasy for so long. And I was just like, dude, this is awesome. Why don't they do this more often? It was also probably the only thing about Type 0 that I liked, was that in Type 0, you'll come out to these world maps. They actually have these big battle sequences on the world maps, and you're running around, like, attacking, what is supposed to represent, like, a brigade or, like, a group of enemies, like an army. But it's just, your little character running around on the but it felt big and like massive, like a really cool huge battle in this. It works for me, and I think it can work. I think that there are a lot of people, I don't know if it might be a subset, but there's still a lot of Final Fantasy fans who would love to see that return, and I think that they could pull it off well. So
what would be so sweet? This is kind of asking for like both things. But if you could like be your big man, run across the continent, but as you choose, kind of zoom in and be like, what's here?
Yeah, that could be
see
cool.
the environment at the scale that you would see it.
That might be too much to ask for,
right? Because they'd have to model all these things,
but it would
no
be
one
sweet.
might ever see.
It would
awesome.
be freaking cool.
Yeah, because sometimes you lose a little bit.
And
of
then if you want
Because
you can spend 12 hours and travel.
That's what I'm
from
about to
city
say.
to city.
Because you could actually make the world that huge.
Right.
Again, you probably couldn't from like a terms of like limit in space of
Technically,
space.
scaling textures and
that
stuff.
might be difficult.
But like that would be, but that would be an interesting idea to where it's like we can make the world actually be that gigantic. Mm-hmm. But if you want to take less time getting to your destination, just go into old world map view,
and that's your fast travel thing.
Yeah,
that actually would be sweet, but that would be difficult on a technical.
If they sped up how quickly a day-night cycle works when you're at that wide scale,
and
so
then that it goes faster.
Slow it down when you're down at the small scale.
Dude,
this is genius. This is
it's
gold
like have
right
your
here,
cake and eat it too.
But it is
Probably
way too much to ask a
technically
developer.
Not possible.
I think
to
it could
develop
work.
Something like that
it could
may
work
never be used.
if you had like an airship or something that could be the representation of your travel at the really wide scale. And then it's like we're disembarking here or something, and then
you just gotta make a massive game that you literally have to stop and camp out.
I don't know. I miss that huge world.
And apparently, it's not possible. We've advanced like so far, and we can't make Final Fantasy VII again in one game.
I guess that's what spurred all of this, right?
Me?
That's why it's just to have that realization. If it is true, it's very sad.
Fetching joke. That is a fetching joke. That is not the reason why. The reason why is because they're prioritizing other crap over the actual freaking game. Yeah. The story, the gameplay, the world, the characters. Stupid.
Anyways. Wow.
We're gonna have to in post, like when we upload this, actually turn that into its own section.
It might be its own section.
Its own section on like world construction.
Yeah.
We during mid podcast we created a new
sub
discussion point
out of thin air, dude.
All right, time to move on to the Nintendo Switch predictions because that's happening here.
2 days for you
soon.
guys. Thursday night.
Oh man! So we've had a lot of rumors about the power of the console,
right?
About what games may or may not be coming to it.
Developers that are going to be at the announcement.
Yes,
Monolith Soft.
Apparently, Monolith Soft will be there. Apparently,
One Up
forgetting
Studios or whatever.
Yeah, the Mother 3 people. Right?
Yeah, One Up. Yeah.
Nintendo is going to be there.
Nintendo's going to be there.
Kimishima, Miyamoto, apparently.
This surprising announcement they tweeted they will be there.
They will be present at their event.
There's a lot of stuff to speculate, but like, what do we actually think is going to materialize? What is actually going to be?
I feel like the $250 price point is.
You think? $249.95.
So what does that implicate in terms of power?
I feel like it's probably
because
a weaker console than what people really want.
No.
I feel like if it's, I don't know, man, it's tough. But
who knows?
From what they're saying, what mobile mode is possibly 40% power of what it is docked. So, I don't know. I would expect roughly Xbox One level stuff. But I'm a battery life person, like with phones and things. I will sacrifice all kinds of stuff to have one.
So you don't think it's going to be even significantly less power than Xbox One?
Oh, well, in mobile mode, I think it would probably be about half. I don't know.
So what?
But
how do
that's
you-
in terms of resolution and in terms of draw distance, but not like the game should still run. The big games should still run in mobile mode. They're just going to be,
I just think it's too power
look as
intensive.
good.
Is the thing. Like I think you could do it, but it would only work for like an hour or something. At full, at that Xbox One level type
so
graphics.
so you think it'll be on Xbox One's level when docked, and if that just
Yeah.
means it would have to be scaled back, or
and
it's
then
scalable.
mode.
But do
So,
you think
like
that
Wii U,
means
when
that
undocked.
they'll be able to bring something like Final Fantasy VII Remake to it at
to
all?
the Switch.
Yeah.
I think so only because of the Unreal Engine 4 connection there, because it works with it, and almost every game is made on that platform nowadays. Supposedly, Epic has made some scalable options.
Right, some
Some
low,
quick
medium,
presets.
high. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it weren't for the Unreal Engine 4 support, like being a known thing, I would be skeptical of any current
It is
first party
good
stuff
to know,
being
yeah,
played, but
that from Epic Games, that the Switch runs it very well, as a matter of fact.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm honestly, of everything, I'm mostly excited about, besides Breath of the Wild, I'm mostly excited about GameCube Virtual Console on this thing.
Yeah.
Which says something
Which
about the kind of games I care about.
I have also heard that the showing for the GameCube Virtual Console is going to be pretty pitiful at the beginning, but
It always is, man.
I know.
They're like,
so bad.
do you remember when they gave away that stupid Yoshi game on the Wii U?
Oh,
They're like,
jeez.
look, NES Virtual Console on the Wii U, and we
Yoshi.
tried playing it.
Oh god, Yoshi
Yoshi.
Cookie. That
It
one?
wasn't even
No,
called
no,
Yoshi.
it
It
was
was
just
just
Yoshi.
Yoshi.
NES
Just
Yoshi.
Yoshi?
And it was like a Dr. Mario kind of thing, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Piece of crap.
That was terrible.
I don't know. There
That
might
was
be
the worst.
something there to the gameplay, but I didn't like it at all.
My gosh.
Yeah, they always suck with Virtual Console launches.
Yeah, I have no high expectations for any kind of Virtual Console support. It will probably go exactly the same way as it always has. And the thing that's so stupid is they just released Pokemon Snap for the Wii U Virtual Console. Thing's dead as fetch. Like, no one is playing that in the game right now. Why would you release that on the Wii U
I'm not sure.
instead of on the Switch? That
But
is going to be
apparently
announced soon.
It's compatible with the gamepad with off-screen play, but not the gyroscope. So you can't even go like this as if you're actually holding a camera taking pictures. You still have to use the right or the left stick. That's bullcrap. Make Pokemon Snap on the Wii U or the Switch. Freaking use the gyro.
Yeah.
That is what that game is made for.
Yeah.
Or make a new one.
Make a new
Make
one.
a new freaking
Yeah.
Pokemon Snap game. Pokemon Snap U. So you take
Snap
selfies.
U,
So it's like
that's
Snap
Snap
U.
U.
You take
Snap
the
U, dude.
selfies.
I'm so excited to be past the whatever you
Me
titling
too.
for stuff now.
Yeah.
I guess I'll probably just say Smash Brothers Switch or Splatoon
Better
Switch.
than
I
you.
don't freaking know, but
Better
yeah.
than you.
The
At
U
least
thing.
for
Nintendo
the
loves to
futures.
put the name of their console in.
I know.
you know,
Ever since the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, Donkey Kong 64. Yeah, Super or whatever. They didn't do it at the GameCube, I guess.
I think that at this point I agree that it will be a significantly underpowered console. I think that's probably pretty obvious, but that makes me more concerned about whether or not we will get bigger third-party developed games on it. Especially with these rumors that they're not going to be shipping that many at launch. It's going to be hard to get your hands on one. It'll have a low install base. Lower probably
Right off the
than
bat,
the Wii U did. And it's like...
Maybe
if
that's why they launched in March. Because if you launch in November and you don't get enough of your units out there, like, you've missed the biggest
the holiday
time
coming
of
up
the
there.
year. Yeah,
That's
like,
true.
you
They
shot
could be
yourself in the
gunning
foot.
for this next
But
holiday.
in March, you can only put a limited supply out there, and then by June, July,
You'll have tons.
people are still willing to
manufactured.
buy your stuff.
You know, there's the argument that's been made that, well, Nintendo fans don't buy these games even when they are on their console. But I think that's because they are always getting the worst version. Like,
Yeah.
The Wii Call of Duty.
think about, like, Mass Effect 3 on the Wii U was launched at, like, $60 when they had a Mass Effect Trilogy game out for the same price on other consoles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
That Arkham Enhanced Edition, Arkham City.
yeah, it's
Enhanced
like
was-
why would I buy that when I can get the entire trilogy in one package over here? I feel like Nintendo consoles always get like the worst versions of third-party software, and that's the reason why they don't sell well. If they were getting the same treatment as the others, then I think that they would sell just fine.
Right.
But
a lot of that's the system's fault. The system isn't capable of doing what the other ones can do. You know?
Yeah, and this is going to be the same deal, really. Except, can the factor of it being on the go really
that's
make
the
up for
one
that?
big thing.
I don't know if it will or not.
Mm.
It will be very interesting to see if it's true that Dark Souls is coming to it.
Right. Or
especially if
Bloodborne
it's the Dark
sequel.
Souls trilogy.
Mm.
If all 3 games are like that, could be a very attractive thing. But
You can fit that on a 32 gig cart or whatever. I don't know what
Yeah.
the max size is going to be.
I
They'll
think
probably
their
go up to
max is 128.
Are they-
But 32 is the recommended.
are they going to be able to pull people away from the console, and especially the PC versions of new games, just because I can take it with me? I think in Japan that will be true.
Yes.
I don't know if that will be true here.
Right.
And that will be the big question for me about whether or not the Switch will be a big success or not.
Right.
But if it is going to come under, I do think it's smart to go at the $250 price point and maybe even take even more of a hit to graphics. Then say
Because-
bump them up a little bit and get as a $50 higher price, at $300 price or whatever, and have it be a little bit better graphically. I still think it's like, well, we come under them anyways. Let's get
Right.
this
Go
down
ahead and
to the most
make it
attractive price
attractive,
points
yeah.
we can.
I just feel like battery technology hasn't made any major advancements in so long
No.
that like the major limitation is always going to be battery. So I almost think it's futile to try to make it, at least in the handheld mode, competitive graphically. So I don't know. I would almost say I don't represent it as that. Like if you look at the Switch as a 3DS successor, it's mind blowing. If you look at the Switch as a Wii U successor, it's obviously less impressive.
It's about on par. It's about where
It's about
It's like, this is the next Wii U.
Now
Okay.
the Wii U launched at $299. So, and the Wii U never really dropped price that much. Like the GameCube was able to recover some ground because they slashed the price down to like $100 or something for a GameCube. I get they never really. What did the Wii U get down to? Maybe $200. I
It
just think
started
it
at 250.
was
I
too
think, and
expensive
it went
for them
down
to
200.
manufacture the whole thing. I don't know what all their limitations were, but that gamepad in of itself, I almost feel like, I don't know, that was the ball and chain for the console.
Yeah, and
because you
that
had to
was
ship with the
expensive.
gamepad. You couldn't ship the console without the gamepad,
Yeah.
and the gamepad just adds a huge extra cost.
So yeah, I think that it will come at $250. It will be pretty significantly underpowered. They won't announce this at it, but like
No.
it'll come later that like the specs show that it's probably even significantly less powerful than an Xbox One, especially when it's in mobile mode. But additionally, I think that they will announce a new Mario. Zelda will come out at the launch of the system, and that they will announce a new Xenoblade Chronicles X game. It will
Probably
not
won't
be
get
a
it for a
launch
while.
title, but they will announce that it's in development. And I think they will. Well, I'm just going to make a bold prediction. They will announce a new Metroid game is in production.
See,
well.
Probably by
especially
Retro.
because we know that it essentially can do Wii type motion control. So that just do another Prime, dude. Just freaking make another Prime with that control scheme. It worked very well.
You could even do. They haven't talked about this yet. This is all speculation, but it's based on some patents that are real. A VR Metroid, a total virtual
VR
reality.
Metroid would be freaking amazing.
Now,
that's for
Nintendo's
sure,
saying
but-
they're not focusing on VR from the get go, but they could still do it at their whenever they decide to do it. And Metroid would be the game that would fit, like the Prime series specifically, would fit perfectly within VR. You've got the two controllers, motion controlled, separate from each other, and the screen like it's the perfect control setup for VR.
I feel like because like most phones nowadays could do Google Cardboard VR,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So it would be very easy to this does VR. They're already going to have the gyro stuff in there. I feel like for some control
Yeah, you'll
schemes
at
for
least
some
be
different
able
games.
to play like that.
Yeah, so they'll have like the enough to get some rough head tracking in, not like space head tracking, but rotation and stuff.
Yeah.
But VR, even on the high end right now, is just freaking not there. Even on the most expensive PC you can buy, with the most expensive headset you can buy, there are still massive setbacks and limitations to it. So while I believe that the Switch will have some mode that will work, like even
Like
like
a
Google
phone.
Cardboard mode,
Yeah.
like any phone could do, I don't think
Exactly.
Nintendo should waste any time trying to promote that as a feature of the system. Because even at the high end, VR is still not super impressive to me
Right, yeah.
with the most expensive PC and the most expensive headset.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that's 10 times the cost of what I believe the Switch will go for. So it's like, you can't compete there. Don't confuse people. Don't make people think that this
That's
is a good
probably
VR
pretty smart of
experience.
them. If they ever even have a headset option at some point, it needs to come after the first year of the Switch. Like, they don't even talk about it because they have mixed their message too many times in the past.
Yeah, totally.
And they need to. It needs to be focused. This is what it is. It's not a freaking VR peripheral for your effing Wii that came out in 2006. This is a new system.
Isn't it ironic that we fit? What were the other?
It's one of the most.
It was mostly
games
We Fit.
of
Yeah,
all
We Fit
time.
sold like crazy, but
Yeah.
ironically, that may have set consumer expectations to be like, oh, you're just going to keep coming out with like weirdo
The
things.
Wii
I
Fit and the Wii
connect
U,
to my Wii.
whatever that is.
So the Wii U, okay, it's another because they even had the Wii Fit U
Yep.
or the Wii U Fit. I don't remember how I phrased it.
I can't remember either.
Talk about getting confusing. No one can keep track of that stuff.
Yeah.
So-
I also think that Skyrim will be announced for it remastered. I'm going to call the Skyrim remastered.
Yeah,
Will
it
be
would
out
have
of
to be.
And while I think that the only smart way to do this would be to release the Dark Souls trilogy together, I don't think it will. I think it will be like Dark Souls 3.
Just one of them.
Yeah, will be announced on it, but it'll be kind of the same thing they did with the Wii U's launch, where they'll bring a couple of kind of larger, in the M-rated sort of like
Right.
range, a couple of those big third-party titles to it, and they won't sell well.
Well, it has been advised already on Nintendo's own website that this event will include some content not suitable for children,
Yeah,
which for a Nintendo press conference is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, look for something on the line of Demon Souls, Dark Souls type.
I am crossing my fingers that there's a few features Nintendo hasn't like totally shown us yet.
Me
I'm
too.
hoping there's a haptic feedback.
On the screen. or-
Feature like a localized haptic feedback.
yeah, that'd be sweet.
Where everyone was theorizing that would be the case because they were thinking they were going to do like on-screen buttons and crap that make it
Exactly.
feel like you were pushing.
I'm
a
glad they're not doing that, but
but
it
I
would
still think there's a place for that kind of haptic feedback. But the thing is that the fact that they didn't show touch anything in the Switch reveal trailer
Yeah, interesting.
is I think for the most part we're going to really see them stick to their message of it's just take it with you or have it at home.
and you play it.
It's
with,
not like a second screen
controller.
experience. It's not like they'll probably have to show some touch stuff at this presentation.
Yeah.
because there's no way it doesn't have touch. There's no
But
way
it'll just be a side note, like, oh, and you can touch this. Okay, now play your game. It's not.
Yeah.
You won't be watching someone play a game
like
on the touchscreen.
yeah.
So has it been more or less? I don't want to say confirmed, but are we confident that it's going to have motion control?
The one so
I
there's
am,
what's called
but
wand
it
mode.
is based on rumors still. So.
Yeah, so there's a company that had some information leak 2 days ago.
Oh, yeah,
and
they make
grips and stuff like that.
Yeah, little
And
accessories.
so they were saying that their grips are designed to work in
something mode,
standard
and
mode and wand
mode.
Okay,
And
So
we
wand
believe
mode
that's a
sounds like
pointer.
Wii pointer
so
kind of thing.
let's say that's the case. If that's true, they will announce a Skyward Sword remaster.
Ooh, yes,
That will happen.
That
it
sounds
would be
for
time
sure.
for that.
because they've done Wind Waker, they did Twilight Princess.
They
right?
will definitely do it.
They probably got someone.
Now, I
that's
feel like
case.
it would come out maybe a year or
Yeah,
so.
it won't be a
18,
launch title.
Yeah.
They won't
Because
compete.
this
with
is Breath of the
at
Wild.
all.
Yeah, this is the year of Breath of the Wild.
Because you get all those parents buying their poor kids for their birthday. I bought you the new Zelda.
I know
Oh,
you
sweet.
did it, Mom.
What?
Not the old Zelda. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
For this presentation, I'm thinking. Oh crap! I had something huge I was gonna say. I can't remember what it is. I'm
Well,
just gonna stick with Final Fantasy VII Remake because that I really don't think it'll be there. But I'm gonna say it better be there. It should be there. Square may not want to say anything about it until their own event, January 30th. I feel like it will come to the Switch, and it would be so sweet if they announced that game for the Switch at tomorrow's conference.
If they here's the one thing that about that particular point that I wonder about. I know that they have some kind of partnership deal thing with PlayStation, with Sony, because it's coming first to PlayStation.
Right.
That's what they announced, is like it's coming first to PlayStation 4 or whatever.
Right.
I wonder, under the terms of those contracts,
is it a
what
limited
they're
exclusive?
allowed to
If they're allowed to talk about
promote
another console before
outside of the PlayStation 4 version of the game. And that
That's
would lead
good.
me to be reticent to say that this event would announce Final Fantasy VII Remake as coming to the Switch. But I think at their own event, without even saying it out loud, like, it's coming to the Switch, everyone get hyped.
Right.
They could list the Switch as like the little
Yeah.
icon underneath like all the versions that are going to be released.
So is it a PS4 exclusive, as in not Xbox One, like Final Fantasy 15?
No,
came to
no.
Xbox One.
It's just
It's just
coming
first.
Okay,
So it will be
could be
when,
a day later or
on
a
the
year
day of
later.
launch. It will be out on PlayStation 4, and I would think maybe a month or two after, but it could be as long as 6 months or a year.
Yeah. So if it's a year, that gives them plenty of time. If it's only a month or two later, that's crazy. That would suck for a company to not be allowed to market for a
version that's
system
coming out
until
right
after this system comes out. Then they only have a month to say, oh, it's available for
So
other
with the way
systems too.
I would think of it almost kind of like what they do with PC versions, right?
That's usually
It's like the
a
PC version
year
comes out
or
like a
6
month
months
later
later?
sometimes.
Like with Call of Duty, for the longest time, Microsoft had an exclusive deal for like the map packs and stuff. They would get them first,
Yeah.
and usually a month before
Yeah,
PlayStation
I think
3 would get them. And so I remember like they would always advertise it, but then they would just say coming first. But
coming first.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they would still show that it would.
There's
support
a
another
difference
console.
between
Okay.
like timed exclusivity and then coming first. Yeah, I think usually, like you're saying, when they say it's coming first here, it's like for a short period of time, this will be the only place you can get it. Kind of like those map packs you're talking about.
yeah.
But when they say exclusively to this, and then like with Tomb Raider, and then a year later it came to
then it came
PlayStation
out on-
4,
Yeah.
Right.
that's when you have the longer separation between releases.
How did they phrase that though? I
a
mean,
good
did
question.
they just say exclusive, or because even the PC version was super
delayed, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I feel like the coming first terminology insinuates that it's a short time period, especially for Final Fantasy VII. I mean, come on,
Because
they're
you
going to try and
call it
sell
an
that as
exclusive.
yeah.
When
gonna,
you have a year later.
You're going to want to sell that as much as possible.
Oh,
You're not going to limit that being not able to go multi-plat for a whole year of time.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense at all to me.
Because the year of Final Fantasy, I mean, this is the
Yeah.
year of, this is their anniversary.
I think it'll be a month delay or
month.
something like that.
So, so I guess the question is, how much would they be allowed to advertise for someone else?
Sure. What are the terms of
Yeah,
Before they say
so
it.
that's a good point to bring up, but I'm sticking to it. Final Fantasy VII at the event tomorrow.
It would be smart as fetch if they could find a way to do it.
If
Well,
they could do it,
okay.
at least show, hey,
There's
we
a
got
few-
Smash. Oh, and Cloud is in the Smash.
Okay, here's the
for
thing about Cloud and Smash.
Switch.
We have not gotten the Cloud amiibo yet. We
Oh.
haven't gotten it.
Oh,
And
that's
they so
They made
far
one,
have
or
been
they're
committed
making
to
one.
making an amiibo for every character in Smash Brothers.
Right.
So they do have to announce that at some point. Whenever that happens, could be prime time.
Well,
to
and
be
they are
like,
announcing Smash.
And
Right.
yeah, that's
Oh, well,
true. I
we
would
think.
expect the Smash Switch.
And
to be
I
announced.
believe it will be Smash Wii U with all the DLC characters and stages.
Yeah, all in one.
And that includes Cloud, and they could just gloss over, like, oh, hey, Cloud's in it. But that would be perfect. That would be the perfect opportunity.
It really would be.
To, like, yeah, Cloud's on the Switch.
If they can
but guess
finagle
what?
that,
He's really on the Switch.
I think that for Nintendo, like the best way to get this thing to launch well would be to be able to say that that's coming.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I have no idea what the terms of their agreements are, or how much they're bound.
Because Final Fantasy VII
not.
was first announced at Sony's event,
But
not Square's event, right?
I would love
so-
to see that happen this week, but I just wonder if Sony has any kind of way of like saying no, you can't promote other versions of it. Ours needs to be promoted.
What Sony would say is they're like, yeah, sure, but you have to say it's coming out for the Vita 2 too.
Not the Vita 2, which is also going to be a thing. I'd say maybe by the end of the year, by PSX of this year, there will be a Vita 2 announced specifically as a reaction to the Switch. Otherwise, they'd have killed the thing. But
they're supporting it in Japan. If nothing else, I do think Japan is a market that can support the Vita.
yeah,
That's my feeling on the matter. It's dead everywhere else.
Right.
So obviously they're moving towards like global releases for all their software. They want it to hit all these countries so that they can like make a ton of money at once and look like really good in the news. And so if the Vita doesn't do well in other countries, can Japan support
right.
on its own?
Especially the Vita 2 would
platform.
likely be PS4 power, right?
Well, yeah, if
And-
they follow that same trend. I don't know. Sony might try and mix things up because maybe they felt like they got something wrong with
Yeah.
the Vita and then it was overpowered. Because
Well,
I've
that-
heard theories that it was overpowered, which meant you needed to put more you needed to invest more,
it was more
to develop
expensive.
for it. It was
But
more
people
expensive to
expected
develop
the
games.
games.
People expect games to sell for like $40.
Right, because the
versus
3DS.
60
Or the
versus-
DS.
Yeah, so it kind of screwed things up. Okay, I'm going to
That's
say
true,
also,
that's true.
like we know this already, but I am hoping this is in an ideal world that the version of Splatoon we're getting on Switch is Splatoon 2.
Not just
a
Not
re-release.
just
a
like
remake, yeah.
And we know if nothing else, they've tweaked a few things, hairstyles, a few different things. Like, I think they showed a new map.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope it's not like Splatoon 1.5. I hope it is Splatoon 2. I freaking really hope that it is.
Right.
I would
A whole
also
new game,
I would
yeah.
also. I mean, they probably are just going to release Mario Kart 8 on Switch as well with some added stuff in it. But
Right.
to me, that's just stupid. Just make a next Mario Kart. Like, it's been long enough.
It's been a
when
few
did that game
years.
come out? You know,
Several
Yeah,
years.
it was a couple of years
make
back.
this be Mario Kart 9, not
or
Mario,
Mario
Kart,
Kart.
8.
Because
and a half.
I feel like the Switch can run the danger of like looking like a platform for ports.
Yeah, I
That's
think you
what
really
it's
want to get away
looking
from
at
that.
right now. Yeah.
Because
That's
they
what's
have
looking
all these GameCube games coming to it with the Virtual Console.
Apparently, Eternal Darkness.
Yeah, Eternal
is gonna
Darkness.
be-
yeah.
And there'll be the Skyward Sword and probably some other Wii games that they could,
yeah.
they could bring over. Don't do that, man.
Mario Sunshine Remastered.
Make this a
was-
console
Sunshine,
of
yeah,
new
Galaxy.
experiences. Like, you really need to get people excited and latched onto it so that you will get that third-party support that you desperately need for it to be a massively successful system.
Right.
And I think the way to do that is, like I said, all 3 Dark Souls in one thing. Final Fantasy VII Remake being announced there. Skyrim Remastered, not the old version, but the remastered
the
version,
remaster.
which is a newer game. A Zelda, a Mario, a Metroid, for sure, all being announced. A Xenoblade Chronicles X sequel being announced. If they
Yeah.
nailed all of that, the hype would be unreal,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
you
yeah.
would sell through that thing like this. If any one of those things, I feel like you don't get, it's just like you lose that opportunity for people to just get like so stoked.
see-
I wonder what they're going to save for E3 this year. By the
Yeah.
way,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
really curious if
Well,
they're going to lay it all out,
I feel like we'll get.
or if they're going to have some surprises for June.
I feel like we're gonna. The Switch launch is gonna be so important.
Yeah.
I feel like we're gonna get basically. This is just a weird year.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say there's probably not any big surprises that are gonna be left for E3.
Okay.
I feel like we're gonna get hints at games. We'll see enough, but the announcements are all gonna come tomorrow. I don't
Even if they're teasers, but then
even
at
if it's a
E3 they
teaser,
can show
yeah.
gameplay
Because
or
I feel like
something.
with Monolith Soft, I feel like they're just
That's
going to come up and just put a giant red X on the screen again and be
And
like,
that's it.
"Look, guys, we're doing it." And,
2022 or whatever.
you know, so.
Yeah.
But Mario Kart 8 is, to me, it's my favorite Mario Kart game that I've ever played. But the problem I see is that the attach rate was so high for the Wii U with Mario Kart 8. They sold a ton of copies. And it was like, I can't remember, I'll have to look up the numbers again, but I think it was over half of Wii U consoles
Had
a copy of Mario Kart 8. Just re-releasing that, even with one new mode or 2 new modes, how many people buy a full-price game like that again?
Right.
And they
it
just bought a
sold
new
well.
console. I just don't.
Yeah, it's
I
got
feel
to
like
be a new game.
it should be a new Mario Kart. It shouldn't be like, here's
The
what basically
question
most
is-
Nintendo fans already bought this exact game.
Right. question is, you've got the 3DS, you've got the Wii U, you've got all the games Nintendo made for that. They just came out with Star Fox. They're working on Breath of Wild and all this stuff. Like how much pressure do we put on Nintendo when we expect them to have all of these new games?
I know, right? Okay, I have an idea. I had a thought. This could be, I think, maybe kind of easier for them to pull off. I think fetching re-release Star Fox Zero as a traditional perspective.
Oh, and change the controls.
That would be very
just
smart.
be like, here it is.
Well, you'd have to change the controls.
No second screen. Yeah.
That's the kind of port that
would
excite
actually
people.
Yeah.
see, because that's what people wanted to begin with, and instead they were forced to use the gamepad, but they'd rather and then release it at what they wanted. That actually would be way better. That would be way
even
better.
at a discounted whatever, it's a kind of game that could work on the go pretty easily.
Oh, totally.
The other
because the
thing-
levels are relatively short.
And they'll not do this, so this is not a prediction. It's not a prediction in any way. But if they did this, they would sell a lot. And there's a whole argument to be made.
we
I
should
think
work
you've
for
made it
Nintendo.
before. You've made it before where you don't want to oversaturate the market.
right.
You want to stagger releases in such a way that you have something to look forward to.
Yes.
I believe that this is
especially the
the
holidays.
concept they hold on to so hard for Virtual Console that when it comes to Virtual Console, that should not apply. What you want is a gigantic library of Virtual Console immediately, all very cheap, that a person can become overwhelmed to browse. Like, oh man, look at all this value for all these old games. You don't want to stagger releases of old games. It makes no sense.
Yes, I agree.
I think you want to like blow people away with an enormous library of stuff that they could binge spend just like, oh, I loved that game. Oh, I loved that game.
Yeah.
And they think they're spending $4 there,
franchise
$2 there,
Yeah.
but it's like they end up spending $50 by the end of that session to
Yeah.
get all these old games they loved.
Yeah.
Like
That's
that's
what,
how you do it.
That's what Microsoft did with Rare when they released 20 Rare games from like N64, GameCube, and all, or older Rare games.
Replay.
Yeah, Rare Replay. That was it.
Yeah.
And just all in one day, just like boom, all of these old Rare games that you loved are now available for the Xbox. And at that point, Rare had more N64 games. No, and Microsoft had more N64 games available to purchase than Nintendo did for their Virtual Console.
Stupid.
Which is really dumb. But you do that. You put them all out. What if they put just like, oh, here's just Banjo-Kazooie, and then like a year later, okay, now here's GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, whatever. Okay, now here's Banjo-Tooie, like way later. That has no impact. But when you put them all at once, like I agree, that's huge, and that made the rounds. Like people were stoked.
Because then the problem is, then you release something like Pokemon Snap, which people would have eaten up at the early release of the Wii U. At the end of it, when no one cares anymore, like what's the point?
You just wasted all that.
What
time.
is the point? That's so stupid. Get them all up there as soon as possible. And if you want to talk about licensing issues, fine. Work those out over the years and get those up a couple of years after launch. But you got to at least have all of your own properties. Just get the freaking ROMs. Just upload them to the server. That's all it takes. Just do it, you fetchers.
I have heard that Nintendo's standards with the emulation for these Virtual Console releases are very high. To when things aren't like emulating exactly the way they want, they will withhold releasing stuff for the Virtual Console. So I don't know, like that's kind of dumb to me. But on the other hand, when there's a new game released on the Virtual Console, it's not like it gets a big marketing push. So you're gonna only get people are only gonna check your store so many times. If the first time they check it's a freaking ghost town, they're like, well, that was fun, and they might not check again for like another
That's exactly
year.
what happened to me.
Yeah, I noticed they never had new stuff.
I actually follow this. If Golden Sun had been uploaded to the Wii U Virtual Console at launch, I would have bought it, guaranteed. Because I was all about, I'm setting up my new system. I'm going to transfer all the ones I had from my Wii over to this one. And I'm going to buy the ones I didn't that weren't available at that time. I got Earthbound right away and a couple of other things. I didn't buy Golden Sun because it came out like this year. And I was like, who gives a fetch at this point?
Like, well, why would you invest at this point?
Yeah.
I'm too busy playing all these other new games and all these Final Fantasy games for the channel anyways.
Yeah.
Why would I buy that? I'm not going to touch it right now.
There's something to be said for capitalizing
early on when it's brand new, it's like I will play that eventually for sure. I will buy that and save it for later.
Well, it's
and
like
people
what
will do
everyone
that.
does when they get a new phone. Hit up the app store. All right,
get all your
I'm going
apps.
to push this system to its limits. What game can I run? You know,
Yeah.
When
And
you're
take it
excited
for
about a
test
new
drive.
You've had the
platform
phone for a while.
you got to have tons of stuff to get for it, so you can build on that excitement when it's new. When it's not new anymore, and it's just like it sits there on the desk. Oh, Golden Sun's up. I'll get to that some other day. Whatever.
Yeah.
Well, then the thought is, well, it'll probably just be on the Switch too. So
Yeah.
I don't need, which is not the case necessarily. Is a lot of Wii Virtual Console games
did not
make
get to the Wii U. That pissed me off so
really,
bad.
really.
What, like
It took
Final
long
Fantasy
enough.
VI?
It took long enough for Chrono Trigger to come, because Chrono Trigger came at the very end of the Wii's life cycle. And then it's just like, oh, you don't get to play that on the Wii. There's no Wii U version, so there you don't get to play it in like HD. You have to switch over
Go
to
back
the
to your
Wii
SD.
mode and see it in 480p. It's like, fetch that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to play it that way. That's stupid.
Yeah. Nintendo has been sitting on a gold mine for the longest time. and
With
it's
the NES
one
Mini,
thing I'm the most
hopefully
confused
that
about.
was like a wake-up call for
Yeah.
them, that so many people wanted it and they did not make nearly enough. And like, holy crap, you guys better jump on this. People are willing to pay a lot of money for this stuff, for
totally.
these games.
Well, so Switch, it's
There
happening,
it
guys.
is.
It's fetching happening.
It's happening tomorrow night. Be there.
It's a real thing.
Be there, be square.
I have heard they're going to allow people at the hands-on event to capture footage for some games, but not all games.
Not all of them.
And
huh?
it makes me wonder,
What's the
what
problem
games are
with
they
that?
not going to allow footage capture for?
You can't film
That's
Breath of
so
the Wild.
weird.
We'll just upload that ourselves later.
I know,
Like,
right?
Literally an hour later, not even.
Or as they were telling us that.
right.
So dumb.
So
Anyways.
Nintendo needs to. I love you guys, but fetch. You are so dumb sometimes, it's unbelievable.
Disney is great
A
at
dense
capitalizing on
company.
their IP.
Yeah.
Almost
oh yeah.
too good. They almost really shot themselves in the foot at one point in time, but I feel like they've leveled out a little bit.
Nintendo needs to do that.
Yeah. I do think that's something Kimishima's bringing, though. I do think that the theme parks and that sort of stuff is
That's true. It's like, make it accessible. Make Nintendo as accessible to everyone as possible. Very smart.
Yep.
All right, we're finally moving on. Scalebound.
So,
Scalebound, which was a game
Yeah.
you may or may not have heard of. They had to they showed some gameplay footage a couple of E3s ago.
being developed by Platinum,
Yeah,
who
for
makes
the-
Nier and Bayonetta, right?
Well, the new Nier is...
Nier
yeah.
Automata.
yeah. Automata.
Nier Automata.
They were developing Scalebound for the Xbox One. It was like a big Xbox One thing, right?
Exclusive title.
Yeah, you know, your guy, you're like your punk kid, always cracking jokes guy.
Yeah,
With his
and
Beats. He's got his Beats by
with his
Dre.
Beats by Dre
Beats by Dre.
headphones. And then he's got a dragon companion that he can kind of command around and fight. Looked interesting. I do remember looking at that footage and being like, wow, this looks very unpolished. The frame rate's bad.
Oh, the frame rate was terrible.
Yeah, it dropped
was
a lot.
Very bad.
I didn't really like the tone of it very much, so
No, me neither.
I wasn't really into it. But they canceled it, and I think that that's significant to bring up because it looked. I think it brings up a point that I've been feeling lately, and in my discussion on Final Fantasy 15, I feel a lot of other people are feeling too. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier in our discussion, but AAA games are bloated. They're getting so big in terms of like team size and ambition.
And
It's
budget often,
just
and-
too much money, too many people, too large a scale to be able to manage in a way. Things get mismanaged, and then it feels incomplete. It feels like it's not done very well in a lot of ways. People feel like really disappointed. And there was one commenter yesterday who said he feels like we're entering a decline in gaming as a whole because these experiences just don't meet the expectations. And they feel like they just aren't managed all that well. And I think that's true, not because of anything other than the larger your team size gets, the more difficult it is to get everyone to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And then that's why you get a team like CD Projekt Red, very small in comparison, but making a AAA size level game to they just do it immaculately. They just nail almost everything. And then you get a team with way more people on it. You think, oh man, they'd be able to accomplish all the same stuff in less time. But I think a lot of times it's like, no, we can be more ambitious because we'll overwork 200 people instead of overworking 50 people, and we'll do even more. But then what they realize is that gets out of hand, and you end up slicing and cutting all the stuff out of the game that can't be finished in time. Rather than, and I feel like I've experienced this to some degree, even on our own film projects.
Yeah.
The more people get involved, the harder it is to manage it, the more difficult almost it is to get something done, versus when you have something very small scale. And I feel like AAA gaming as a whole needs to step back several paces and say, like, it's just not manageable to have teams that large and ideas that ambitious. Let's scale it back in order to make sure everything's executed super well.
I think there's something to be said as well for, like, if you've waited 5 years for something,
Yeah.
you know, that is going to be just the way humans work. It's going to feel different than if you waited 1 year for something or 2 years.
Yeah.
And so when development takes so long and they announce it so early,
Yeah.
I don't think you should be announcing these games when you're still just making concept
That's why
art.
Bethesda's so smart.
Yeah.
They don't
Totally,
announce
they don't.
Skyrim
That's
until
very
the
smart.
year it's like
Yeah.
a few months. Guess
It's
what?
like, time to
Skyrim's
go,
coming.
guys.
It's like, what the
And
fetch?
you would
Skyrim's
think-
coming right now.
Oh,
Like,
this isn't enough.
That's
like
smart.
time. This isn't enough time for a big marketing push or anything. But it is. It is plenty of
It's
time.
concentrated.
Yeah.
It's meaningful, purposeful. It feels like they know what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but just it's becoming standard for a game to take like 5 years to make. Fine, I get it. It takes a long time to make these quality
don't-
experiences.
Just don't tell people
Don't
about it yet.
and don't show people too
Yeah.
much too early. I think Nintendo did this with Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, that game was supposed to be out in 2015.
It was supposed to be out,
Yeah.
quite a while ago, and
Years ago.
they showed quite a bit of that game. And remember that sit down with like Miyamoto and Aonuma,
Yeah,
and they're like,
Aonuma.
sweet, and then you can
And they're
shoot
showing
like
how
this.
big the world
and here's how the
was,
horses work,
Yeah.
and everything. And it's
A
like,
long time ago.
Wow, this
that was
is
a really
finished
long
game,
time
it
ago.
looks,
And
yeah.
and in their defense, like, and probably even Square Enix's defense, they probably thought they were closer than they
Yeah.
actually
Well,
were.
because I
never
think
done
they
this
wanted to get it
before.
done on Wii U, maybe even as early
Yeah.
as holiday 2014, but then they had to delay it to the next year, and it's like, okay, for sure, but it's like, we got the Switch coming out.
And then they're realizing sales aren't what they wanted.
Yeah,
and
we might as well
wanna
just wait
dump this
until-
here. There's definitely a lot of moving.
So
moving
announcing
pieces.
it that early is a huge detriment.
Which is even crazier when news comes out like it did this past week that the Switch or the freaking Zelda, it may not be done. It may not be
Yeah.
localized.
I
It
was
may
like,
not be ready
what?
for Europe and for other places.
Yeah.
That they have literally been sitting on this for years, and it's been done, but apparently it has not really been done. And you find things to do as projects drag on and go on. You find more things to add, more things to keep yourself busy with when you don't really have a set deadline like that. But anyways, it's
I thought a thought was Scalebound. So I was reading someone was saying that they had shown at this last E3 to just small private showings of some stuff they had done in the game. Apparently, it was like a first-person type mode, and I was confused by the way they described it. It was either your guy's first person or the dragon's first person, but you control the dragon in this mode. And then so you could like jump into it and then make the dragon do stuff for a little bit and then jump back out. But I was thinking, like, it's a game where you have a giant, large, powerful AI companion who is supposed to feel like they're their own living being, right? What other game have we heard of that had a really hard time developing a similar concept? Last Guardian, right?
Yeah.
I think it's hard to do. AI in games is in some ways is still one of the biggest hurdles. It's crazy.
So the whole game relies on you and your relationship to this creature.
Yeah.
And you're both supposed to help each other out. But if there's one bug, it's game breaking.
If
It literally breaks the game if there's one bug in the AI of the guy because you can't go to like Last Guardian. You would literally not be able to go to the next place if he bugged out
Right.
and didn't do what he was supposed to do.
Well, and you would need to make that character meaningful. Otherwise, it's like, why are you fighting with this dragon if you can
Right.
take care of everything yourself, right?
So you have to
so
rely on
it
them.
puts some weight on that character to accomplish objectives and things. And I think those are the hardest games to make,
Yeah.
where you have a companion or you have some AI.
You're
It can be
relying
any
on the
kind.
AI to progress.
Yeah. It makes it really tricky.
Yeah.
So it's too bad to hear, but also at the same time, it's nice to see a company willing to cut, losses and sunk costs and whatever, and just move on.
Right.
I don't know what happened though between Microsoft and Platinum, or if
what their relationship is going to be.
Platinum's it seems to be working on so many things these days that maybe
they're
they've
doing
just
a lot.
they've spread themselves really thin.
I
in
think
some
I get
ways.
the sense they have. Yeah.
Because I mean, they're-
Korra, Ninja
Oh, I've
Turtles.
heard that they're going to be
Yeah,
working
Transformers.
on their own new like IP. That's their own.
Oh, really?
Like big game now. And who's the director?
of Scalebound.
Scalebound.
Oh, Kamiya. His last name's Kamiya.
Kamiya?
I can't remember what his first name is.
Hideo or Hideki Kamiya or something like that. I can't remember. Anyways, guy who's directing that game has already been talking about a new project that he's been working on.
Yeah, that's
And so it's like, when did Scalebound actually get canceled? I mean, this game may have really not been touched for a while.
could have been canceled at E3 where they're like, look what we got. And, they're just
And
like,
Microsoft's like, okay, dudes, we're taking our money back. Now, honestly, the game looks fine. It looks fun. But the main character, dude, like, go back and watch that trailer. Like, he's like the 1980s James Bond, just like cracking jokes at everything that happens and like, you know, just making fun of whatever, and just kind of like Deadpool style, but not. I don't know, people actually liked Deadpool. This doesn't really seem to exude the same feelings. This is more like, wow, this kid's a punk, dude. This kid's a
how
little
cocky would you be if you had a dragon
butthead.
and you just...
It's a good point. It's a good point he makes about dragons.
This may be the most realistic game ever made in that regard. But anyways, it just didn't appeal to me. It looked just ridiculous. It looked pretty dumb to me. But
Yeah.
you know, some other people may have been excited for it, and that sucks that it's not coming anymore.
Don't announce your fetch just to generate hype because you don't have anything to announce because you
Right.
screwed up your planning at E3.
Well,
You're like,
that's
crap,
the
we don't have
difficulty
anything. We gotta
of
show this one.
Microsoft funding this game, because they want to sell the Xbox. They want to sell
Yeah.
their system.
Yeah.
So if they can say, "Oh, this is what's coming, buy our system now," because look what's coming.
Oh, the people
They
who bought a PS3
do
for
that.
Versus 13 or whatever.
No, exactly,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
the same
That's what I
story.
did.
Yeah.
And that's what Mike did.
Yeah.
And so
PS3
then,
for Versus
so in
13.
that sense, yeah, Sony won. Like Sony did great, or Microsoft. Oh,
They
they did
pushed
great.
it, sold the console.
If
it's
even
true.
one person bought a console because of their Scalebound announcement, which probably didn't take all that much, it's like, okay, sweet. They didn't really make the game. Like, they didn't have to pay for all the distribution costs
Yeah.
they were going to have to pay for. It's just like, oh, sick. We got people to buy it.
I
And
have
so
to say,
they don't
like,
see the negative aspects
they're
of it.
burning bridges here at this point,
Yes.
like Sony and Microsoft, because like you have enough of these happen, and people are going to wait to buy the console until they know the game is
Which
coming
is what
out
should
instead of
happen.
on hype.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Which is why, even though Breath of the Wild was announced a long time ago, it has been nice that Nintendo has.
How many
at
people
least
bought a Wii
lately,
U for that? How many people bought a Wii U
You know
for
what?
that?
Thinking there would at least be one Zelda on the Wii U, right?
Yep.
At least a Zelda game. At least one Zelda game. And I know it's technically
it will be
coming out on both, but I mean, seriously, Nintendo missed the Wii U window for a Zelda. They missed it.
It's coming first to Switch.
Coming first is
Coming first to Switch.
and that's
I think it's
freaking.
probably true.
But I bet you a ton of people bought a Wii U for that game.
Probably
But
a
I
lot.
do appreciate Nintendo's like more recent approach in the last 2 years, where they are no longer talking about the far distant future. They're like, no, games this year. And people asked about Breath of the Wild in 2015 when it didn't make a showing at E3. And they were like, you know, we're only talking about games that are coming out this year, instead of all those other companies, which they were one of, obviously. But they had to rip on Sony a little bit and be like, oh, you got some companies announcing games won't come out for 5 years, and we're just talking about this year. And it's like, dude, you did that last year. Breath of the Wild 2017, they announced that in 2014 anyways.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's a good point on the Nintendo thing. I know we're past that topic, but because they didn't really, it was mostly just Zelda at E3, they definitely have hopefully some stuff that they're just sitting on there.
Yeah, that's true. They could have. They've had more than a year to just kind of silently develop all sorts of games.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the news.
Time
A
to
year
get...
to develop a game, though, that's laughable.
There's a lot of news we just reported. We're moving on to your questions, viewer-based questions for us.
Yeah.
And this is Savage.
Oh, we got this one right here.
Oh,
Yunza
Yunza
Provo.
Provo. Sorry, Yunza Provo's first. We love you, man.
Who does
When are
not
we-
live
when
in
are-
Provo?
When are we gonna have sushi? What are your favorite video games based on movies? Games based on movies.
Aladdin
They're so
for the
bad.
SNES.
That is a good one.
That was a good one.
That's
Aladdin for the SNES was actually really
That's a really good
fetching
So
good.
Yeah.
But yeah,
are we
most of
talking
them
about-
are bad.
Are we talking about games that could be like loosely based, like say
Oh.
Rogue Squadron? I mean, that's based on Star
or,
Wars, but it's not based on any of the movies.
I would go on the side of specific movie versions, game
In
version
that
of
case,
the movie.
So not Shadows of Mordor.
Not
Shadows of Mordor.
Not Shadows of Mordor. Nor even The Hobbit. That game sucked. But it wasn't based on the Hobbit movie.
No, it was based on the book.
More or less based on the book, yeah.
But like those, we have different Lord of the Rings games. Some of them are based on the book. Some of them are based on the movies. Right?
But the one based on the movie Return of the King, that one's actually really sweet.
That was a lot of fun back in the day, for sure.
It's
not actually a very good game, but it was fun.
Game.
It was fun.
There's not a ton of substance to it.
For me.
It was way fun.
Because I wanted a Lord of the Rings game so bad.
It's like a Streets of Rage. You just go around and just kill everything and get super overpowered. And Legolas shoots 2 arrows at once after you're level 20. And just like you kill 2 people like in different directions every time you shoot.
Here's my feeling.
It's the best game.
Like Dynasty
My
Warriors.
feeling about the Lord of the Rings movie-based games, the EA ones, I remember seeing a screenshot for it was like the level that's in the Mines of Moria, and it shows Gimli holding an axe and like the light streams coming in. I remember seeing that screenshot and being like, holy fetch, that's gonna be sick.
I never played that one.
It was because they had 2 of them. They had the Two Towers, which covered Fellowship and the Two Towers.
Yeah,
and
I
then
thought that was weird.
Yeah, Two Towers I didn't like because it wasn't co-op.
Yeah,
Return of the King
was co-op.
Co-op.
So that was cool.
That made it cool.
But I remember being so stoked for that, and then it came out, and I was really disappointed because it's just like those 2 games, they lack like depth. It's all about like, see, it's a total like misunderstanding of like what people like about Lord of the Rings. They love its depth and its world building and that kind of thing. That's not like the right setting for an action based like combo experience building
buttons
things
until you get to the next area.
It's they turned it into a cheap action game,
totally.
and that doesn't fit with what Lord of the Rings is, right? And so, like, I was so desperate for an RPG Lord of the Rings that I went back and played some, like, really obscure Super Nintendo. I found an emulate, like, a ROM.
I feel like you showed me that game.
And it was so bad. Oh, my gosh, it was horrible. But I was just desperate. I didn't want to play that. I wanted to play, like, an RPG.
That's why I played RuneScape, man.
RuneScape, yep. RuneScape.
And I'm still waiting for that game.
Gave me a world to explore.
I'm still waiting for a really good RPG Lord of the Rings.
See, and I think they're afraid to make it.
They have an MMO, but I don't like
Lord of the
MMOs.
Rings Online.
I'm not looking for an MMO.
Bethesda could do it, but I don't think they ever will.
Yeah,
I mean, the license cost to make a Lord of the Rings game, I'm sure, is just astronomical.
Or at this
Gotta
point,
ask Roy Tolkien what
right, that's true. And that's probably the bigger problem, Mike, is that you can get a license to make a video game based on the movie, but the substance, the books, the history, the lore that you're talking about that you want in a game, you can't. That you have to get that from the Tolkien family, and fetch me if they would ever
how does that even
sell.
work? What are the boundaries for that?
Like, well, I remember
when
that
you're
Peter
developing
Jackson,
a game, the movie's not done generally.
Right.
So it's like, how do you know? Do they give them a film script and be like, don't do anything outside this?
That's a very good question.
Like, how does that work?
I don't know.
I mean,
or if they did include one thing from the books that was not in the movie,
yeah, what would happen?
And
would it get taken off the shelves? I don't know.
You know what though? If I really think about it, I'd have to play them again to actually know if they're good or not. But I think those Harry Potter games that were based on the movies, those were actually pretty fun. I only played up till the 3rd one. After that, I think they ended up getting like kind of progressively worse. Like they just weren't very good.
I heard the
when
third
they got
one's
up
the
to
best one.
when they got up to like 6 and 7, people were giving them really low scores. But that 3rd game especially was like super fun. And I think we had the first one on PC. What is the first one called? The Sorcerer's Stone?
Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone, depending on if you're
depending where
got
you
the
live.
European book or the North American.
I played the crap out of that one, and I remember thinking, this feels disjointed. I wanted something that felt like I could explore the castle and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was broken up in like small little areas. You didn't feel like I had freedom to explore. And the 3rd one gave you that freedom.
See, that's the difference, though. That's what you're talking about when you talk about how the Lord of the Rings games focus on just the fighting, and you just go fight after fight after fight after fight. But then the Harry Potter games let you explore the castle. They let you walk around and explore what you want, what you couldn't do in the movie.
Yeah.
And
that's a good point.
If the Lord of the Rings games let you explore Middle Earth, those would be the best games ever made.
Exactly.
But they don't let you do that. Whereas Harry Potter does, and that's what you always want to do when you're reading the books, when you're watching the movies. You want to explore the fetching castle. Yeah.
I play Lego Harry Potter, dude. They let you do Lego Harry
Yeah,
Potter.
dude, for real. I would say that third
Love
one,
to do
the Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban on GameCube, I think I played it on. I like that one a lot. That's probably my favorite movie-based video game that I've played.
My
Sweet.
favorite movie-based video game is probably GoldenEye 007. Not only
That's-
because
yeah.
it's... I don't think it's still a great game necessarily, but at the
Right.
time, it was
Oh, yeah.
probably the most fun I'd had with any video game
Yeah.
at that point in time.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't hold up very well, but as far as when I actually played the game, I love the crap out of it.
No idea. Our favorite is Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible 64. Oh man,
Without
God.
question, the best movie.
the
Video game.
absolute best. So I loved Aladdin, but that just kind of it's a 2D platformer. The
The game
games
was really fun.
are what's popular at the time, and
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings was just this fighting mash game. But back in the SNES days, all the video games that were based on
Platformers.
movies were all platformers. And Aladdin was actually a really good game. Most people probably played it on the Sega Genesis. No,
Yeah, that's the version I
Genesis.
have in here.
Yeah. But I played on Super Nintendo. I don't know the differences in the gameplay, but yeah, I had a lot of fun there.
You have to think harder about what button to press on the Genesis.
Yeah, it's tougher. It's more difficult. Holy crap, C button.
Well, there's
What
like
the freak?
6 buttons. But I'm trying to think of more recent ones, because those older ones, they sort of resemble the movie, but not really.
They were.
It's not at all.
Well, with
It's just
GoldenEye, I remember
the character names.
I didn't get to watch that movie until
Dude, it's
years
nothing
after
like
the
the
game had come
game.
out, and I remember being like, "What the fetch?" Like all these things I kind of recognized from the game, like, "Oh, that's why you were in a tank in this place," because you. What the
Yeah,
heck?
you watch the
took
movie,
a
it's like,
tank to the
whoa.
city. Yeah,
That's way
Doesn't
different.
make sense.
That's funny because that's really funny actually, because it's supposed to be a game based on the movie or whatever. But as kids, often I think we would play a game before
Before seeing the movie.
and we
Yeah.
would get an idea of where
Yeah.
this is going, and then it would be so different in the movie. GoldenEye's a good example. My parents wouldn't let me watch that.
No,
Right.
So I played the video game and thought I understood the story.
Yeah.
But then I watched the movie years later and was like,
And it's
what
not.
the
Yeah.
freak?
It's
Yeah.
so different.
What
Yeah.
the freak? That's way different.
Like they never went to the Aztec ruins. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. It's trying to piece together why. did
Where's
he
the
go
golden
here?
PP7?
I know,
How
never
come he's
busted
still
it
using
out.
the oldest gun
Where
in the
did
game?
Oddjob go? He was.
Yeah, Oddjob Jaws. Where are all those guys? Yeah,
Anyways,
good stuff.
to answer to that.
Good Wing Guns Provo.
All right, now we're on Savage's question.
Savage.
Landon will probably be best to answer this one.
Well, okay, so you asked, I have the feeling that Japanese storytelling is very often very vague, and I do not understand certain aspects of the story properly. So I was wondering, is this a cultural thing? Like, if I could speak Japanese and would understand the way they think and talk about certain things, then I would get the story. Because in the last couple of years, I often left with this feeling, like something maybe is lost in translation. Now, the answer to that is yes and no. Some things, if you study the Japanese people or culture or whatever long enough, there's some hints and suggestions of things that you'll maybe pick up on that you wouldn't have otherwise. But generally, those things aren't story dependent. Generally, those aren't plot points. They're not usually character motivations and things like that. One good example of this is Persona 5. Touches on a lot of themes that have to do with where Japan is currently economically, the results of the lost decade people talk about of the 90s, and kind of trying to find out what it means to be Japanese today, right? Those are themes that obviously are only gonna really resonate with Japanese people, and they'll resonate very strongly with them, which is part of the reason I believe that Persona 5 got a good critical reception in Japan, was because it spoke to the Japanese people. And so I'm very curious to see what happens moving forward with the localizations to other countries. What I like about their localizations is they preserve the Japaneseness very thoroughly. So it's for the most part, if you still know anything about Japanese culture, you can use that knowledge to enhance the story. They're not trying to mask over it. So you'll still hear san, sama, kun. You'll hear those honorifics and things. Even in the English, they'll preserve those. Because it's there's not a good version of this, and this can sometimes help clarify a situation a little bit. But as well as signs sometimes are left in Japanese, you can't read that's the name of this shop. And you've been told to go to this shop, and if you can't read that, I mean, you'll figure it out eventually, but it still feels like Japan, they're not apologetic about it. Like, I haven't played any of the Ace Attorney games yet, but my understanding is that they localize those games to be like, this is like Los Angeles or like America or whatever. It's essentially like a Japan town of like somewhere in the West.
And they totally change.
I don't remember. I don't think they try to make it seem like it's an American city. I know that explicitly in the last one that I played, which was not the one that just came out, but the one before that, they really do take you to some very exotic locations. The very Japanese look to them in the design and the architecture. And I know that the court system itself is supposed to be in some ways like a criticism of the way that Japanese courts work.
Right, because the way judges and... Yeah, like if you're in Japan, if you are convicted of something, or not convicted, if you are accused, I guess.
Yeah, you're guilty until proven innocent
more or less, like the conviction rate's like 99%. It's insane. So yeah.
They kind of touch on that in the series. So.
I had just read that the Phoenix Wright series, I think because the decisions made in the first game, has had to kind of do a little bit of weird backtracking to excuse that they're like they tried to make it seem like at least the first game wasn't Japan. I'll have to read up some more about that.
That could be true.
And because they've been building off that localization.
It's been maybe 5 years since I played the first one, and I've played 2 other ones since then, and the one most recent in my memory still came out in like 2013 or something, so
it was a while ago.
Yeah.
There's a really funny webcomic I found that was kind of making fun of that, like Los Angeles, looking out and it's like Tokyo, very opposite, or Kyoto or somewhere.
That's funny.
Anyways, that's all like subtext. So like I think it's easy to miss subtext. If you're missing the actual content of the story, that I don't think can be chalked up to cultural difference. It could be a bad localization, that's entirely possible, but storytelling follows generally the same principles across language boundaries.
Well, the example we just learned about both yesterday and today, we were looking at the scene with Arden in Final Fantasy XV,
yeah.
And in the English version, it's a heavy implication, but not explicitly stated, that Noctis's family surname, their original family, was not Lucius Caelum. They stole that name. His real ancestors were surnamed Izunia. He doesn't say that explicitly in English. He just implies it, and that leads to people debating. Well, what do they mean? Was Izunia the first name of this person or last name? And I kind of had that in my discussion video this week, and we listened to it in Japanese first, and you thought that the word "say" was a different "say."
Yeah.
Because there's like dozens of different words.
Like probably about a dozen or so different things "say" could mean,
right? But then when you saw the kanji, it was like, oh, it's this version of "say," which is surname.
Yeah, surname.
Which means in Japanese he said to him, "Izunia is your last name."
Essentially, it's like who's last? Yeah, who? Yeah.
He implied it's not implied. It's explicit, and so like that, those kinds of things can be lost.
Yeah, that is true. To me, it's like that's the problem with localization. The whole thing is like you like if that was supposed to be a subtle thing or maybe a more explicit thing, then that should be directed to whoever's doing the localization. Make sure this point is getting across here, because sometimes somebody could take because with the scripts, as long as they are in these games, I mean, people doing these translations are taking some personal liberties throughout.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're supervisors, but it's like it's just too much for the director to sit there, because like Tabata, I don't believe his English is like
solid,
anywhere above an average Japanese person's English level, so he wouldn't be able to sit there and go like, hold on. And that's the problem, I think. You need people that can straddle both sides, and there just aren't that many of them that have a great grasp of both languages.
Heian comes to the rescue.
Yeah, Heian's got a good grasp.
Heian comes to the rescue. He knows both languages, plus Norwegian.
Which is funny, because he's not a native speaker of either. But he knows both better than a lot of people.
I would say, not having any specific examples of stories that you were talking about, there are a lot of stories that are just not well executed, and I think that makes people believe that, oh, maybe it was better executed in the original language.
Sure.
Where it's like...
They kind of want to believe that.
A case-by-case basis, obviously, yeah. But so it is true, you could miss subtext for things, but doesn't mean you won't know the plot.
Have you found
right?
in general that Japanese stories tend to be more vague in their delivery?
Okay,
and
so
they rely a little bit more on doing that purposefully.
That can be true in Japanese literature. There's an author
That's an
specifically.
Eastern.
Yeah, it's a
general.
very Eastern thing. There's an author specifically. I can't think of what his name is right now, but he's known for writing this kind of Japanese horror that sometimes will be called slow Japanese horror. And he died, I think, in like the early 1900s. But what he would write is stories of somebody like walking into the woods, and it's like you don't know where they came from or where they're going, but they're here, they're in the woods, and things just start getting creepier. And as they progress, it's like time. He's losing sense of time, and it's almost like a Rip Van Winkle type thing. And then the guy either disappears or you know it's left open ended. And so that there's definitely a tradition of that in places in Japan where it's either moral ambiguity or literal storytelling ambiguity.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you're not 100% sure.
That's one of those byproducts of, like, we in the West see things a certain way, we're told stories a certain way, and they live happily ever after. The end is a very common thing that we have heard since we were children, and Western stories always have to wrap up in a very specific way, otherwise we don't think it's over. That's the way we were raised, and that's the way we expect stories. But I've heard tons of stories from places like India, Japan, and China that don't do that at all. In fact, like, I would say that most stories, at least earlier before this, Western influence spread all over the world, were not like that. Like a lot of the Buddhist and Hindu stories and a lot of their, like, mythology, I guess, they're not, we wouldn't even call them stories. They're just like, there's this one Hindu story about a guy who walks up to the ocean and this fish comes and, like, he gets in the water and they have this, like, story, and then he leaves, and that's the end of the story. Like, the fish talked to a human, and, like, that is the story. The story is the event, not necessarily that there needs to be this arc to everything, and every story has to have the exact same arc with the resolution and the climax and all that stuff. That's more or less a Western invention that everyone's trying to do it now, and it's been that way for a while now, but that is not traditionally how it's always been. And so I think places, especially in the East, really do have a lot of their traditional stories that they grew up hearing or telling are just they're different structures than the Western ones that we've known from romance cultures and languages.
There are some older examples in the West even where you see more of that ambiguity, like in Greek mythology. A lot of those stories, it's like, why are these two people even here? What's going on? And then there's some bad outcome or whatever, and then that's that. Or you've got Zeus screwing with people half the time, having kids with mortals, and then having all these offspring and just getting away with it constantly. And there's a little bit of that in Western traditions. I wouldn't be too surprised if it wasn't a little bit of influence of Christianity in trying to, like, imbue a moral on a tale.
Imbue a moral into it.
Yeah. Which is the funny thing when you look at, like, Norse mythology and Valhalla being a place. Okay, now correct me if I'm wrong. I could be totally wrong on this. My Valhalla... But is Valhalla like a constant war? Is it you go to Valhalla and...
With Ragnarok? Ragnarok's the war
you
that's
fight?
going to end everything, right?
Right, but is that in Valhalla? Or is Valhalla peace away from war? Or is Valhalla...
I think it's just a place the warriors wait for Ragnarok.
Okay, so that is so different from heaven. From Christian, Jewish, definitions of... The resolution to life should be you're at this place, you do live happily ever after. You literally live forever. Happily ever after. You are happy forever. And that is heaven from a Christian perspective. Whereas from other cultures, it's like, no, dude, there's still this crazy stuff that's going down. There's all these other reincarnation. Other cultures have so many different ideas on what happens
what
in
it means
life
to end.
What ending means, especially Buddhist and Hindu with the ideas of reincarnation gives this whole different aspect to things that the Roman Christian West does not really accept and really would rather ignore.
That's been a big
possibility.
thing in terms of cultural reception between the Dark Souls series in Japan and in America, is that like Dark Souls 2, people got really tired of this idea that like this is a never-ending cycle of this undead coming about and rekindling the fire again, linking the fire again, and then there will be a period of peace, and then this thing just goes in a circle forever.
Right.
And in Japan, it's like that idea is very appealing.
It's Buddhist.
It's Buddhism, yeah.
But all the American people were like, "I'm so tired of that. When is it going to
Give
end?
me happily ever
When
after.
is it going to end?"
Totally.
And whether that ends in accepting dark, which is kind of a dark ending, it's not necessarily good happily ever after ending, but they just want that cycle to end.
They don't like the prospect
of it just
uneasy.
happening forever.
The idea of infinity is...
Like, it's like, fetch, I don't like that. And I think that was a lot of criticism that Dark Souls 2 had, was like, I feel like I did the same thing again. I don't like that, that's very interesting in the cultural differences. And so that could lead to, some of these stories coming over and having some concepts like that are uneasy or that are vague in a way that like we want some resolution to that.
Yeah.
So one interesting thing, and this has to do with some research I'm doing for the next Lost in Translation, but the idea of yokai or like mythical creatures is sometimes bad things that humans do are blamed on yokai. So for example, if someone's in a bad mood, it's not like, oh, that person's like got a problem. It's like something in his environment is messing with him to cause him to behave this way. And so there's this idea
almost like a
of
feng shui thing
you don't
too.
Well, I mean, that's true. You don't like own your actions per se. You're almost like subject to the world. And so like if you are bad, it is more than likely because there have been some bad influences on you, not something internal about you yourself or your soul or your internal desires. Because if the context was able to be changed, you would not be bad.
Right.
You are completely subject to nature.
Mm-hmm. That's so funny because that's a complete opposite from like Christianity, which the assumption is man is born evil, you need to be baptized, you need to overcome this evil nature. Whereas with Buddhism, it seems like, no, man is born good, and these other things just kind of give us all these problems, and
Well, and the idea in
it's
Buddhism
an environmental thing.
Isn't even necessarily a good versus evil. It's really just a balance, because it's you
it's
only
both.
experience bad things
That's
because
so not
you experience
Christian.
good things.
Yeah.
And so if we can clamp down on this, we'll clamp down on that, and we'll just level it out, and it'll just be this neutral piece, right? And that's like the long-term perspective, and that feels a little like what you're talking about with Dark Souls, where it's like that doesn't appeal to many Westerners. The idea of just neutralizing.
You're supposed to kill Ganondorf. You're not supposed to like live in harmony with him.
Like
let him do evil to people, and I'll do good to people in equal measure.
Balance. Yeah. No. You've got to kill all the evil.
But the idea
it makes sense both ways.
That they would attribute somebody's bad behavior to, so there's a yokai messing with him. And if you play the Yokai Watch games, that is included in those games. Like a kid's parents are arguing with each other, and the kid has the ability to see yokai that regular humans can't. And so all of a sudden he sees there's this yokai there that it brings contention. And that's the only reason these humans are arguing, is because there's a force of nature that is making them do something, but it is not their fault. And so what it does that I think is scary to Westerners is it makes humans not as much an agent of choice and change as just any other part of nature, where a rock crumbling off that cliff did not choose to do that. It was just its circumstances. So that's a very Eastern thought process versus Western thought process with that sort of stuff. Even like, I totally forgot what it was called. I had to look it up again. But The Tale of the Genji, like the first novel in Japan, is a very like, where's this going kind of story. It's mostly about this guy and essentially his love affairs and stuff. And so, it's tough. I think that the current traditional Western way of telling stories is obviously the most dominant one, at least
worldwide now.
Yeah, worldwide.
Because
Western culture has and colonization.
Yeah, Western culture. We
I'm not saying. I shouldn't say we.
I wasn't there. Right. Our ancestors forced themselves on everybody.
Right.
Yeah. So it's there's so many different ways.
That's how it is now, and it is true that being in Japan, you would understand certain stories better.
Right.
But that's cultural. That's even beyond the language. That's like literally growing up in a country where these stories have been told for millennia.
Yeah.
That's what you can't replicate that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You weren't told those stories growing up, and you want happily ever after. I'm sorry. It's just how it is. That's how I am. I want resolution. I want endings. I want, I want things to follow a certain arc all the time. I don't like it when stories don't do that. But that's a very Roman Western.
And we've seen those ideas influence a lot of very popular stories that have still succeeded in the West, like Final Fantasy VII has a lot of Buddhist ideas about
Final
how
Fantasy
life
XII
works.
also has the yokai thing you were talking about. How
Really?
sometimes they'll see someone doing something crazy, and it turns out there is like a demon spirit that's like possessing them more or less. Yeah, it's crazy.
And the end, I was going to mention the ending of Final Fantasy VII before they expanded it into Advent Children and all sorts of stuff was very vague. And did our people survive that? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
All that's important to know is that the Earth's balance
It's finally
returned.
at peace, yeah.
And that was what they were seeking for. But all the American people were like, what the fetch, what happened to the people I like?
Yeah, I want the people.
Yeah.
Screw the environment. I want the people.
Which called for all of these extra things to be made, and it just didn't really work. Like
now
Advent
the
Children...
Earth isn't at peace, it's actually mad.
Yeah,
like
the Earth's
Advent,
mad at you.
I think Advent
Curse you with
Children
the
is a
disease.
really poor way of following that up, because it's like, let's try to give the people some more detail about what happened to the characters, but in doing so we have to create new things for them to confront.
Yeah.
But in doing so we have to make some of the characters go through the same thing again. It's like, I really like Final Fantasy VII just ending on that note. Like the world went back to the way it was. Nature took its course.
Yeah.
The world still exists and it's at peace. And who cares? Mm-hmm. Really, that's not what matters.
Right.
What happened to Cloud and Tifa and Barrett afterwards is not what matters. What matters is that the goal was accomplished.
And that's just so...
I feel like that's very powerful and central to its message. That's more important.
How Final Fantasy VII Remake's going to end.
Yeah. It won't end that way.
I think that you're attached to the characters. You've got to focus on the characters.
Tie it into Advent Children somehow.
Yeah. The prequel to Advent Children, that's what this is.
But yeah, I really liked the ending of Final Fantasy VII. And I know there are a lot of people who don't. I see people say that on my review of it all the time. I hated the ending of this game. And I think it's because a lot of the Western mindset is like, where's my happy ending?
Yeah. Where's my glory? Where's
my peaceful resolution for the people I care about?
Or even if it ends badly, where is that? It just doesn't exist. Yeah.
What happened to
it's
them?
Gone.
Yeah. Like, it's just funny to look at, like, just imagine if you had grown up hearing a completely different set of stories that from what you actually did, you would definitely see the world differently, and you just can't totally accommodate for that. That's the difficult thing. You can learn a lot about it, and if you care to maybe understand some of these stories that you suspect have Japanese themes, then by all means study Japanese culture and
it will help,
look more into it. There's definitely a lot of stuff in a lot of these. However, I will say that like Final Fantasy, while it's created by a Japanese team, it's very much borrowing cultural elements from all over the world.
Yeah.
And so even in like Final Fantasy 15, like we were talking about, studying Greek culture is going to help you get about every bit as much out of Final Fantasy 15 as studying Japanese culture would.
That's true.
So,
yeah, and like with Final Fantasy VIII especially, there was a lot of they did a lot of traveling to like a lot of European cities to sort of like generate like the look and feel for the game, but also just a lot of concepts. There was a lot of European influence on Final Fantasy VIII, so they try to
very multicultural.
Yeah, they try to be very multicultural with Final Fantasy. So,
which is cool. Like in playing 12, it's clear there's Middle Eastern and Turkish and like Ottoman themes like all over 12, and I freaking love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'd almost do better to study the history of,
whatever
Byzantine Empire as opposed to Japan.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Sense.
Totally. Thanks for that question, Savage.
That was a very good question.
Go on to our last one. Nothing really always has great questions.
It's great questions.
You're a regular on this podcast.
If you were asked to pick a game or a few to be representative of how video games are an art form, what would you pick?
Dude, his questions are like the antithesis of his name.
Nothing really.
Plenty of substance.
Plenty of substance should be you got to change your YouTube avatar to plenty of substance.
Oh my god.
All right. So I think
let's just get Journey out there. Let's just say it. Just
Yeah, like-
it is Journey, right?
Journey is
Other than
we've talked
Journey.
about that.
Is probably what you're asking.
Shadow of the Colossus. I've talked about that a lot.
Right.
Let me see if I can think of. Why don't you guys go now? Let's see if I can think of something.
Okay,
Different.
so this is tough. I want to say this is a game I bring up a lot. Like, I think it's not as artsy as a lot of the stuff that like what was it, Abzu, that more recent game that's like you're in the ocean with all the creatures, basically by the Journey developers. I'm trying to think.
Flower or
Well, no, there's a new one that was just at this last E3.
they haven't. They
It was
haven't
like
released it
ocean
yet.
creature stuff. I think it was Abzu or something. Anyways, there's those games that are very, like, I guess...
Flow was the one I was thinking of.
Oh, Flow, yeah. They're very obviously artistic in their approach. But a game that I really like as a cohesive whole, that I think all the artistic elements that went into creating it complement it, the whole very well, is Bastion. I think the soundtrack to Bastion is phenomenal, and it complements the tone of the game very, very well, to the point that it just feels like kind of experiential, at least to me. While I don't think that's a game that would be typically called like representative of games as an art
That
form,
actually
I do
came
think
to
it does a good
mind, even
job.
though I haven't played it.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's a pretty good example. Yeah, of what you're saying. All of the elements are cohesive. They're all meant to lead to an experience.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, we'll tell you the story and then we'll let you play the game.
Oh,
They're
like,
not
we need some epic music here.
separated. You know, yeah. It's like all of it very obviously is working towards the same central message and
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
I think that's a great example.
Obviously, the other easy ones to go to are like I really enjoyed Child of Light. I know there's a lot of people that didn't, but just visually, Child of Light, I think, as presentation goes, is. But I would not put it at the same level as Bastion.
Yeah, certainly not.
In that sense. However, just the art direction of it, I think, would be a great example of a game to show to basically anybody and be like, look at this screenshot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say The Last of Us. And I know that might be unpopular amongst a smaller subset, because there are some people who I think heard about how great it is, and anytime you hear about something being really great, you get these ideas about what your standard of really great is, and then it doesn't hit that. And so a lot of people call The Last of Us...
It becomes overrated.
Overrated, right?
Yeah.
The Last of Us is one of those games that gets labeled as overrated a lot. But this is why I think it's an art form, or an art form. It is a work of art. For that same reason. I think that everything in it works towards a central experience and a central whole. In contrast with a very similar kind of game, Uncharted, which I feel is incredibly divided between what the story is when you're watching it and what the story is when you're playing it. What you do when you play Uncharted is kill people a lot and climb some rocks. What you do or what you watch in Uncharted is a story about people solving puzzles and mysteries, and there's a whole other element to it. I don't want to call it cerebral necessarily, but they're very intelligent people who are working towards solving problems, solving mysteries, and when you play the game, you kill people and you climb rocks. So, like, those two things don't go together at all, in my opinion. The Last of Us does. The Last of Us is about survival, and it is reflected both in what you watch and in what you play. Very, very much. They are extremely cohesive. And everything, sound design, cinematic techniques, performances from the actors, writing, and gameplay, and music, all reflect that message beautifully. And that's why it's one of my favorite games of all time. It's an incredibly well done game. Very focused on a central message, and it's done beautifully. So that's what I'll say.
Wind Waker. I'd say Wind Waker is.
Good pick.
Wind Waker's good. There's a lot of, even within, like, painting, there's a lot of different forms of art. There's, like, Van Gogh's different from Picasso, who's different from Cézanne, who's different from Da Vinci, and they all are so different. Each one of them focused on different things and different aspects. And in that regard, even like a children's artist is a children's book illustrator is still an artist, and nobody would ever dispute that. And in the sense of Wind Waker, you've got a lot of a lot of like childish themes, but I don't mean that in a bad way. Like themes of growing up, of being a child.
What's important to a
And
kid. Yeah.
exactly, and the art, the art of the 3D world and the look, the style of that game complements those things very well. You're not some kid growing up and in like this super grungy, hyper realistic world, which could also work depending on what you're going for. This is more, the story is being framed and told a certain way, and it is a happy story, and it is told in a happy way, and it is, it has its moments, and it is honestly outright creepy at certain parts, but it maintains that throughout. And obviously the music and the themes and the story, it all follows very much that type of story. And I feel like it's a very good example of a cohesive work of art that is all, self-contained like that.
A game...
Very consistent.
Yeah, I totally agree. A game that I think was trying a little too hard to go for the art angle and kind of missed it for me was Dear Esther.
Yeah, for sure.
Dear Esther, it was like... I don't know. There was something about...
Because that whole the story, the message is dictated to you. What you doing is just walking to the next dictation. You aren't discovering it really.
Yeah.
And like that's where games like that they're trying to appear artsy, but they don't actually understand that all parts of the experience need to be getting across that message.
It's still very interesting as a game to play,
sure,
but it's tough when you can tell their selling point is like, we're creating this artistic experience, and I just don't feel like it is that.
Yeah.
When it's like, is this your strong point, and that you just weren't playing.
I think Gone Home is another one that's probably very similar. A lot of people criticize that game for the same reason.
It's just like,
just go around and read the papers, and you get told a story.
And it's like, in every bit the sense that like turning pages on a book is an action you do to obtain more story, but you just weren't involved in, like, there's no system, which is like what they talk about. One of the only things video games have that are completely unique are systems and ways to interact. And if there's no interactivity, no true interactivity,
meaningful interactivity,
then it's like, okay, you might as well have been an audiobook.
Yeah.
Or
exactly.
easily could have been a movie.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to judge whether a game is a work of art is, could this have just worked as a book that you read or a story that you read?
So, like, was game the right medium for this?
Yeah,
right. For
this. Or was the gameplay necessary in delivering the message? Could you not have had the same experience if this was anything else other than a game? And it's like, okay, I think that's a pretty good way of measuring. Like The Last of Us, you could have made that a movie, but it would not have been the same thing as being there, struggling, walking through this, fighting for your life. That's not the same experience watching somebody do that.
No, totally.
Not that it can't be a great movie or even a work of art as a movie where you watch a person's experience and learn from it, but it isn't the same. It is not the same as interacting with it that way.
When it's done well, it's like you have ownership in you have a personal stake.
Sure.
That whole type of immersion where you feel like you are there. It's like you just want to look around and just actually be there. That kind of immersion that, like, when you see a kid playing a game and they're just freaking zoned in on the TV and they're experiencing that kind of immersion.
I'll be very clear in stating that Silent Hill Shattered Memories is not a work of art. But I will say that the idea behind it is one that can lend itself to a game being a work of art, in that the way you play it, the way you explore it, the way you interact with it is central to the message that it gives you by the end. It psych profiles you as you go through it. Like, that's an example of the gameplay being used as a means to deliver a story. And like, that's kind of, at this point in my life, that's where I'm wanting to see games go more. I think it's still a young medium, and it's still developing, and obviously a lot of resources, like we are talking about earlier, are going into certain aspects that we feel like are superfluous. They're not like all that important really to us, but I would love to see them scale back from, can we make the skin be even more realistic? Can we add more polygons to that tree? and instead focus on how can we make the gameplay deliver the message of our story. Instead of just like, what's popular right now? MOBAs. Let's make a MOBA game. You know what kids really like? They really like for shooters, first-person shooters. Let's make it a first-person shooter game. I feel like there's too much of like, oh, this is popular, it will sell, let's do it. Instead of thinking about like, does that gameplay system actually add to our ideas, our concepts, our messages, our themes?
And I feel like that's where large projects fall into that a little more often because they have to support their funding, or they have to fund their team, they have to support their team. And
that's the limit.
It costs a ton of money.
The limits, as weird as that sounds, with the boundless amounts of money and resources they have, those are the limits of AAA games that indie games can explore.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why indie games tend to feel
Smaller
more artistic.
Team and go somewhere riskier.
Yeah, than AAA games. Because they're limited by the fact that we spent this much money, we have to make this much money, we have to play it safe. And it's a weird conundrum there.
Yep, so...
I would say Breath of the Wild, because technically we played it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how the story goes, and story is a huge, important part of... I mean, it's an art form in and of itself, but... it's an important part of the artwork within a video game. And I don't know the story of Breath of the Wild at all. It could be terrible. But I do think just the way the world's structured and the gameplay complementing the way you feel in the world and the way everything is also very artistic.
Dude, okay, I just had a thought.
It's a Miyazaki movie.
Just talking about the story and stuff, this actually kind of ties into our previous topic a little bit better. But what was that Korean movie with that monster that's on the loose? And
okay, give me a second.
Parker showed it to us.
The Host.
I think it was The Host.
It was called The Host, not
So
Stephanie
that-
Meyer's Host thing.
Oh, not Stephanie Meyer.
This is a Korean movie from about, 8 years ago? 10 years ago?
Yeah, and it's super, like...
Very good movie.
It's a great movie, but also, like, is not a Western appealing ending.
Not even close. That's true.
It's kind of, like...
You guys should watch The Host.
And not even, like, the way horror movies usually are. Like...
Because those are arbitrary. It's a horror movie, so we have to make it bad, even though there's no reason why.
And then there's no...
And nothing works out, just because
Yeah,
it's
but
a
with
horror
The
movie.
Host, like, there's some really... interesting things in that really, really are not anything an American film would have done.
No way. So, anyways, that was totally like tangential, but I just thought of it. Yeah, man. So if you guys haven't played any of the games we talked about, you should go play them.
Yeah,
and have that artistic experience.
Dark Souls is artistic. I'd say that as well. That's another game that I think is.
And that one, the gameplay really does complement the story.
Exactly.
Like it really.
The gameplay is the story.
A struggle. Yeah.
The gameplay is the story. It's not trying
and dying over and over. It's in the story.
I talked about, and I'll do this again in my finale Final Fantasy XV discussion because some people brought that up. Like, hey, you're saying that this isn't a good way to tell a story, but that's like basically what Dark Souls is, right? Like you like that game, so why? I'll get into detail on that later. But for now, I'll just say, Dark Souls isn't trying to tell you a story. It's giving you a world to explore. It's letting you go discover. That's its whole goal from the outset. There's not like cutscenes where like this character shows up and be like, let me give you some exposition on what's going on here. It's like the whole idea of it is you're there at the world's end basically. Like everything's crumbled and destroyed, and it's like trying to kind of discover how did this happen. And the whole idea of it is based on the creator's attempts at reading Western fantasy novels as a young Japanese boy, and he didn't have that strong a grasp on English, so he didn't really understand what he was reading. He understood parts of it, and he tried to kind of piece them together in his mind, but he was fascinated by the imagery, by the ideas that he could grasp. And so for him it was like trying to solve a puzzle, and that was his whole idea behind Dark Souls. And so it's going for a totally different goal.
In kind of a weird way, Dark Souls is more related to like like an arcade game like Time Crisis in some ways than it is to like a traditional RPG or a
to any of the games that have the same look of Dark Souls.
Yeah.
It's not
the
like
way
those.
It plays and the way it flows. Yeah. Well, nothing. That was a good question.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it for our podcast today.
I think we're done.
It's a long one.
This might be the longest podcast we've ever done.
It might be.
I always feel that way, and then we'll go look at it. It's like, oh, that was an hour and 15 minutes. What the fetch? It felt like 6 hours. I think the longest we did was like around 2.5 hours.
2.5.
Two and a half.
This is.
And we'll see what this amounts to.
You guys are all laughing right now. You're like,
See, you know how long it's been. We have no idea.
oh, jeez.
Anyways, if you're watching this on YouTube, I went backwards. I was supposed to say if you're listening audio only, you can watch this on YouTube. But if you're watching this on YouTube, we have an audio only version. It's in the description.
Yep.
Go check it out. It's too late at this point if you didn't know about Timecodes, but there are Timecodes down there, so you can skip around. But if you're listening audio only, we have 2 YouTube channels. Our main channel, Dark Pixel Gaming, where we do game analysis and this where this podcast goes. Yeah. And then our filmmaking channel, our second channel, our supplementary channel, Dark Pixel, where we do film projects and things.
Yeah,
go check them out. Just tell us what you think. Tell us how much we suck. And we'll see you guys again on Friday for our live stream. Peace out.
All right, peace.